Now recording.
Okay, great. Welcome everyone to another exciting episode of the Gin and Tonic Show. Today we're discussing the history of Muslim-Jewish relations and what went terribly, terribly wrong. I'm your host, Almighty Atheismo. Joining me today is the Rationalizer, Klingschor, and Stopspamming. If at any point you'd like to join us to discuss our topic of the day or anything of your choice, any question or comment, just send a Skype contact request to the Gin and Tonic Show. When you do so, please include a short message telling us how you'd like to be introduced and what it is you'd like to discuss. When you call in, make sure to mute and minimize your blog TV so you don't see and hear everything twice. Also, all people who join the panel, all of our guests are advised that we are broadcasting live over blog TV and recording for later upload on YouTube. So, Muslims and Jews don't get along. Yeah. The end. They don't like each other.
That was a short show.
Yeah.
Can I take the lead here?
Yes.
All right,
I'm impartial because I was accused in the comment section of the last vid of being a Jew because I don't know why.
We're all Jews on the inside,
Yeah.
really. Just letting everyone know, we're paid by Zion to criticize Islam, and also the Freemasons, the Crusaders, the New World Order, and
But not
CIA.
the Zion you think. It's actually the Zion off the Matrix, because that's more cool.
I considered
Completely different.
I considered making like a fake commercial, like the Gin and Tonic Show is brought to you by Jewy Juice. Choose Jews, choose Jewy Juice.
That's right. Truth. Words of truth. Before I begin, just a really quick plug. There's a fundraiser for Syria and the Syrian situation. It's called Sweat for Syria. We'll link it on our Facebook group, Gin and Tonic Show. Facebook.com/The Gin and Tonic Show. Feel free to go check it out. Okay, so when we're looking at, or when we're discussing the issue of the history of Jewish-Muslim relations, it's really important to know that there are sort of three ways to look at the history. Basically, they are the Muslim apologist way, the conservative Zionist perspective, and the real perspective. The first one, the Muslim apologist one, is basically that since the time of Muhammad, throughout history, Jews have lived in a paradise, golden age of paradise under Muslim rule. And there was coexistence and candy and wonder and just, magnificent in coexistence, toleration and interaction between them all under perfect Islamic rule until Israel was invented, and that's when Jews and Muslims stopped getting along. And it's really the fault of the Jews. Right, that's narrative one. Narrative two is the conservative, sort of right-wing and Zionist perspective, which is that it was all evil, pure evil, from the time that Muhammad lived. Just Muslims have hated Jews and have just taken every single opportunity just to treat them meanly and have just constantly just treated them as mean as possible could be, and it's just all evil, and Jews have ever suffered, and there's been no good, and that's that. And then there's the real perspective, which is somewhere in the middle. There's been a huge variation. It's an extraordinary array of extremes. In some times and places, Jews lived prosperous lives under relatively fair rulers, under Muslim rulers, and even reached positions of great power and influence, and in other circumstances they experienced extreme persecution, discrimination, and even genocide. I guess it's really important to take that into account, that there are sort of these different ideological narratives that actually poison, our investigations into this issue, so it's important to be aware of them.
Isn't there another side of the coin? I mean, there were times when Muhammad and his followers, initially they got along great, isn't that right?
Yeah, and then, that's going back to the very beginnings. That might be a good idea, actually, to really go back to the roots of the whole issue. It doesn't necessarily extrapolate from what Muhammad did, what actually happened from then on, but it is useful, it's interesting, I think, to have a look at this. So essentially, in the years before Islam, so this is late antiquity, so this is let's say from the time of Jesus up until the beginning of Islam, so up until about 600, Jews were becoming more and more prevalent throughout the Arabian Peninsula. You had large Jewish communities in the Levant, in Syria, Palestine, and also in Mesopotamia. But you also had large Jewish communities in Hadramaut, so modern-day border of Oman and Yemen, and in Yemen. And you also had large Jewish communities in the Hijaz, which is Western Arabia, where Muhammad lived. So when Muhammad was born and grew up, there was actually a continually proliferating Jewish presence in Arabia. And there were, like, for example, when he moved to Medina, a notable Jewish rabbi is recorded in Ibn Ishaq to have converted to Islam. And one of Muhammad's wives, well, two of them, but one was a concubine, one of Muhammad's wives, Safiya bint Huyay, was actually a Jew, and she ended up converting to Islam. And essentially, right from the beginning, Muhammad had a lot of contact with Jews. Now, there's often an argument. To what extent did Judaism influence Muhammad? To what extent did the ideas and concepts of Judaism influence the Quran? And the answer is a lot. Muhammad was accused by the Quraysh, by his fellow Arab tribesmen, of copying from certain individuals, and some of those individuals cited were Jews, and it seems like they were right, because so much of the Quran is copied from both the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, and also rabbinical literature. It's quite remarkable, actually. The most mentioned name in all of the Quran, can you guess?
Moses?
Correct. 136 times Moses is mentioned. Abraham is mentioned 69. Noah is mentioned 43. Adam 25, and so on and so forth.
So, I mean, what are the doctrinal points where they rationalize? I'm sure that no sensible Orthodox Muslim believer or scholar is going to give any credence to the allegation of copying. But obviously there is a shared origin, right, between the different Abrahamic sects. How do they rationalize that Moses and Abraham were Jews and now there's this antipathy? Well,
they don't. Really, what Muhammad's a very common theme throughout the Quran, and this is actually noted by Alfred Guillaume. I can't say. It's a French name. I can't say it. The guy who translated Ibn Ishaq into English.
Guillaume.
Yeah. Alfred Guillaume. Okay, thank you very much for that. My rural Bergen Australian tongue troubles itself on these fancy foreign words. Alfred Guillaume says in an essay that he wrote about Jewish influences in the Quran, he talks about how essentially what Muhammad does is that he takes these ancient prophets, Moses, Abraham, or Abraham's a patriarch, whatever, ancient biblical figures like Moses and Jesus and so forth, and what he does is he'll take them, but he'll have them basically say what he says in the past. So in the Quran, they always appear preaching his message. They're Muslims. They're not really. I mean, they're Jews, but they're Muslims. That's the way Muhammad sort of gets around it. It's that all these great biblical figures and their biblical messages are all Muslims, and that really any coincidence, I mean, between the Quran and previous scriptures is that the Quran reaffirms them. Because the Quran is a legacy. The Quran is the legacy of Judaism and Christianity. And so it's a confirmation. That's how they rationalize it.
Stop or Rationalizer, you have a comment?
No.
My impression was always that the people of the time seemed pretty desperate to have some kind of a messenger. The Jews had their messengers, and the Arabs in the area were feeling a little bit left out, and they were all kind of thinking, "Oh, we're just about due a messenger by about now." And because if you read the life of Muhammad, the Guillaume translation, and it talks about how people are like lamenting the fact that they're pretty desperate for some messenger of God to come along, and one hasn't come yet, and they're really looking forward to it happening. They feel a bit left out. The Arabs want one of their own, and the idea that Muhammad couldn't have known about the religion of the Jews because he couldn't read is really quite ridiculous, considering the amount of Jews that there were in the area at the time that he could have heard stories from. And it would seem that he possibly heard the stories and then either heard them wrong to start with or forgot them, because the amount of times that he messed up the Jewish stories, and then the Jews would come and mock him afterwards and say, "You said this, that's really silly, it's wrong." And then Muhammad would say, "No, you've got it wrong, I'm here to put it right." And then some revelation had come out where God himself would prove that Muhammad was right after all. And it just happens so much. If you read through this book, the Jews are coming and they're really ripping into him. I can see why over time he really started to hate the Jews, because of all the people in the area, the Jews were the one that knew Judaism, and he'd just keep talking complete and utter rubbish. And then they'd come up to him and say, "Oh God, you're talking rubbish." And he'd say, "No, you're talking rubbish. I'm telling the truth. I'm here to put it all right."
Actually, what you're saying is interesting, because it's something I've looked into in regards to the whole thing about did Muhammad meet any Jews and the nature of the, he couldn't read. And the thing is that it would actually be really surprising if he could read, because the nature of, as you were saying, the nature of the narratives that appear in the Quran are really indicative of him getting it from oral sources. Like on the first part, with Guillaume says, quote, "All external evidence for the place and importance of Jews in the life of Arabia in the 7th century is scarcely needed, for the majority of the chapters of the Quran witness to the depth of the impression they made on the Prophet's mind." So we don't need historical references to Jews in Arabia, even though we have got many, and like Muhammad's freaking wife was one and so forth. We actually don't need it, because the Quran is evidence itself of all this copying. And as for the nature of the sources, sort of oral versus textual, what you're saying is confirmed by Guillaume and Rosenthal and Tisdall. This is what Guillaume says. He says, "The impression the Quran makes on the reader is that its Jewish fibre has been spun from hearsay and scraps of information gathered from conversation from different persons. The extraordinary solecisms of the Quran, for example, the confusion of Miriam, the sister of Aaron, with Mary, the mother of Jesus, are probably due to Muhammad's obtaining information from synagogue proselytes of his own race, rather than from men of Jewish descent." So here we have two. First of all, it's from oral sources. Second, he reckons it's probably from Arab converts and not really from pure Jews themselves. And the second point is irrelevant, whether or not they were proper Jews or ethnically Jewish or Arab. The fact is that they all agree. Like Rosenthal says, "Muhammad was acquainted with Jewish teachings not by reading the Bible, Talmud and Midrash, but through serious conversations with Jews." And Tisdall, I think, makes the most poignant point. "The many errors that occur in the Quran show that Muhammad received his information orally, and probably from men who had no great amount of book learning themselves."
But then how does he come across these things that the Jewish God has a son?
It's actually really, really important to remember that the Quran is a polemic. the entire book is a polemic. And so, like, in argument, like, it makes sense that Muhammad would just make up these kind of slanders to prove a rhetorical point, you know.
But including the name with Ezra and all these details?
Yeah,
why do you do
yeah.
that? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Because he was proving a point, because he was trying to claim that the Jews were not purely monotheistic, or that they had strayed from true religion. And he made up this point.
Okay, I got our first caller. It's Gunderson. We got 2 more after him. Good show today for callers. We got a lot, and we got them early. Well, while he's getting in, I'd like to one comment. Yeah, you know, the thing is, it seems like Islam and Judaism had the same messy divorce that Christianity and Judaism had, in that they began on very friendly terms, even to the point of a great deal of overlap. But then, because one religion was evangelical and the other was not, it seemed like they were on a collision course. You know, with one group having a near monopoly on the core original doctrine, and then a new group that wants a new religion with new precepts. They're going to be introductions and changes, and it was just bound to be messy. Gunderson, thank you for joining us. What do you have for us today?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Well, one thing I wanted to say is that, I've heard quite a few, explanations about, what the Jews of, Yathrib or Medina, what the bad things they did from certain Muslim sources. And one thing I notice is that they always seem to have this good versus evil narrative that you expect from a fictional story. And
what kind of things? Do you remember any specific examples?
Well, basically about how the Nadir, the Banu Nadir tribe, and when they... So, what happened? Something about them trying to conspire with the Meccans? Is that what happened?
Banu Nadir, no. What happens with them is that Muhammad is low on cash.
Is
so
it
he
the
goes
Qurayza you're thinking of? The Qurayza that he accused of...
No, not the Qurayza, the Nadir.
I'll tell you what happened. The Banu Nadir Muhammad goes over to their quarters because he's low on cash. And he's going to, because one of his followers has committed he's killed the wrong person, so Muhammad has to pay blood money. And so Muhammad goes to them to get some money, because as per their previous agreement with everyone in Yathrib, everyone would help everyone out. And whilst he's there, he was sitting with them chatting away. He's in their quarters, and at this point Muhammad's very poor, as evidenced by him having to come and get this money. And these guys are quite prosperous, and he's sitting there, and he's in quite dire financial situations, and suddenly he gets a revelation from Jibreel telling him that the Jews are conspiring to kill him at that very moment, and that they're hiding around the corner or something. So Muhammad just quickly leaves and tells his followers, gets his men together, goes and attacks the Jews. That's what happens.
That's it.
So it's just a fundraising campaign?
Yeah, essentially. Money for Syria.
Yeah. Well,
now, I think some Muslim sources record that the Jews were like, oh, how did you guess? But of course, that's polemic. That's nonsense. That's just Muslim.
And we would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you damn kids.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's exactly like that. It's these two-dimensional bad guy characters, and it's nonsense, of course. If the Banu Nadir existed and this happened, of course they didn't go, huh, you got us. You got us this time, Muhammad, but not next time. Of course they... And that's literally what Muslim sources say. Then the Nadir were able to negotiate a surrender of some kind. They left all their property, all their land property, and went to live in Khaybar, where they plotted against Muhammad again. I was like, of course not. It's nonsense. It's just Muhammad had a convenient scapegoat who he hated because they were such vicious critics. I mean, who else would know that when Muhammad says that the Pharaoh from Exodus ordered the anti-Jewish Persian politician Haman from Esther to build the Mesopotamian Tower of Babel from Genesis, in Surah 40 verse 36 and Surah 28 verse 38, who else but the Jews would know that he was full of shit?
Yeah.
And that's why he hated them.
And that they didn't practice crucifixion in ancient Egypt either.
Yeah.
And that it didn't rain in ancient Egypt, it flooded.
But we interrupted your train of thought, Gunderson. You were saying...
Yeah, basically, all of these stories seem to have like a good versus evil narrative that you expect from a fictional story. It's got a good guy, which is Muhammad, obviously, and the bad guys, which are the Jews, and not even just what happened at that time, but also the past narratives, like when it talks about the thing with they killed a man and then they couldn't find out who killed him, so they kill that cow and then they bring him back to life.
Wait, what?
My favorite.
No, they strike the dead body with the piece of the cow.
The steak.
Yeah. Yeah, that.
Yeah, someone dies, right, and no one knows who killed him. So they say, someone says, "Oh, right, go and kill a cow." So they go and kill this cow. I'm not sure if that's the story when they say, "What kind of cow?" One that's not too.
Oh yeah, they do say that.
I think it's 260
you'll get that. What colour should the cow be? Not too brown, not And then eventually, after like 4 years, or I don't know, exaggerating, of working out what the cow's birth sign is and stuff, they get this cow and they kill it, and then they cut a bit of meat off, get it, go up and go slap on the dead body. The dead body stands up and points at the guy who killed him.
Wow, Muhammad is like Jonah Hex.
But there is a similar story. I think I read it somewhere by the Jews. Maybe it was in the Mishnah or something, and it was.
It is.
It's something. It's not. I don't think it's a story. I think it's a law, and it's something to do with if someone gets killed, and they can't prove who did it, then they have to measure the distances to the towns or something.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then what they do, they have to wash their hands.
Have to sacrifice a cow to
Correct.
Yahweh to say
chop off its head.
we're sorry, something like that. And basically, he's taken this law and thought, I wonder what would happen if that really happened. I know. And then, and you know what happened next? Right, they slapped the cow and he did it. It's like, a little boy that goes off on one in junior school, starts telling a story and then gets really excited, and then there's aliens and everything. And, that's just exactly how I see it. He took this thing that was a law from Judaism and he thought it was a story and just put this bit about some bloke coming alive. I mean, why God? What kind of a weirdo, right, knows who killed this person, and instead of beaming the thought into the head of this messenger and saying, Frank did it, he says, right, I'm going to get the body to come alive and say Frank did it. Okay, that's more convincing. We know that the prophet's not lying then. But no, you can't just make him come alive. They have to go through a rigmarole of killing some poor innocent cow, cutting it up, and slapping the body around a bit with a bit of beef. What the hell is going on?
I admire his dedication to due process. Can't have a murder without a witness.
That was probably a poor example. It's the Quran often talks about how, you Jews in the past, you've killed prophets and accused them of lying and, shit like that, basically. That's really what I'm getting at. They usually seem to be the bad guy.
I think that by this time, you might have already had a very anti-Semitic breed of Christianity having arisen, and I wonder how much that fed into that narrative, the idea that, you had such and such a prophet and you mistreated him, in the same lines of,
I wouldn't doubt that's where that idea came from.
Right.
Well, just point out, the Quran wasn't always anti-Jewish, anti-Christian. In the beginning, Muhammad was very embracing towards them. I mean, the Quran at one point says that Jews and Christians will get into heaven. And then later on, of course, as the Jews criticized Muhammad and failed to conform to his vision, then that's where then mean verses come in.
Thanks for your... Did you have anything more, Gunderson, before I let you go and bring in our next caller?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. Salam, take care. I'm going to bring in Shantanu, our old friend, and he's... I forgot. I keep asking... I used to clear with them what they wanted to talk about. I keep forgetting to do that now. He's going to talk about something.
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
Namaste. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's of course an off-topic discussion as usual with me. I remember seeing one of your episodes, and you were talking about Mahabharata. I think it was. Was it? No, it was Ramayana. I think you were talking about Ramayana, where Hanuman has to fly, to Sri Lanka and
that's a great one.
burn the whole kingdom down, which is of course a very funny story. I can give you hundreds of such ludicrous stories, absolute ludicrous stories that I'd heard since I was a kid. One of them, which to me is strikingly crazy for a religious story, is the story of Ganesha. Now, what happens with Ganesha is his mother, I think it's Parvati, his mother. Yeah, his mother is called Parvati, and it's Parvati. And she basically one day decides, hey, it would be cool to have a son. So she draws him on a piece of paper, a human figure, first of all, and brings him to life. This semi-god son of hers, she brings him to life through this drawing. And so there he's come to life. And apparently he's protecting the door for his mother while she's having a bath when Daddy Shiva comes in, right? He's the one of the blue gods with who kind of sits like this on a hill. You must have seen him. But anyway, he's the Lord of Death. Okay? And he basically orders this little kid that he sees to get the hell away from his house when he returns home. And the kid says, no, my mother is in there and she's told me to protect this place, so I'm going to do that. So this guy's like, what on earth are you talking about? This is my fucking house. Sorry for my language. This is my house. Get the hell out. And he doesn't agree. So he basically chops his head off, right? But all this is fine. But then Parvati comes out and she's like, oh no, what have you done to my son? You've killed him. So now Shiva says, oh, what do we do about this? What do we do about this? Right, this leaves us with only one option. We need to get him a head. Where are we going to get this head? Right, let's ask one of the other gods. And he says, basically, the only way you can bring him back to life is by giving him a head transplant of an elephant. And so they cut off the head of an elephant and place it on this kid, and hurrah, he's Ganesh now. It's the same guy with the same neural features, if you like, but for some reason he comes back to life in an elephant. I mean, that's the level of ludicrous stories you get in Mahabharata and Ramayana, and it really baffles me that people still believe Hinduism of these religions. People still believe Hinduism. Because it's just so out of the way ludicrous. It's more nonsensical than Ali Baba or any of those stories.
Did you hear what happened in part 2? In part 2, the follow-up film, what happened is he had a bag on his head, and they'd tour him around all the circuses, and he'd say, "I am not an animal. I am a human being."
Are you talking about
the Elephant Man? Come on, get away with it. But is this the story? Is this story something that people believe today still?
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, I guess they don't really think about it because it's like the moment you talk about these things, it's like, oh, it's my religion. Let's not discuss it there. When you talk to Muslims, at least they're open to discussion because it seems to me like most of them are so arrogantly firm about their faith. So if you talk to them, they would argue back. They're like, oh, it is totally scientifically perfect and whatnot, and they'll discuss it with you. But I think with most Hindus, they kind of know how ludicrous this is, so they won't even go there. They would be like, this is my religion, back off,
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, but I mean,
Rationalizer, can you do that again? It sounded so nice.
you're right. I mean, if they transplanted an elephant head, how did he have the same personality? That reminds me of Fallout, where you have the dog, and you give the dog a brain transplant, but it still has the same memories and whatever. You like if you transplant another dog attacks you, you take out its brain after you kill it, you put it in the other dog's head. That dog would immediately be like, "Hey, it's you again. I remember you. You shot me." It doesn't make sense.
And my suspicion is, right, the original story, whoever fabricated this amazing story, first said, right, this guy has lost a head. Let's get him another human head. Right? That's what I suspect would have been the original story. And then, when mothers would read it to their kids, they'd freak out. They'd be like, shit, you're chopping the head off a human being. What the hell are you thinking? So they changed it to, maybe an elephant, not so bad,
Yeah.
They probably wouldn't have done it with a puppy either. Imagine doing it with a puppy, cut the head off a puppy and put it on this man.
Yeah, but you're right. I think they do approach things differently. If this same story was in any Islamic text, they'd say it was some sort of a prophecy of the coming of brain surgery, 1,000 years before the invention of Western science.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. and one more point is with the same thing. There are many scientists who are Hindus. Like one of our presidents, APJ Abdul Kalam. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was a Muslim, and he's basically a nuclear physicist, and he had a huge contribution in India's nuclear power. And he's regarded as one of the greatest scientists, and he was the president of India. And he basically he had a mixture of beliefs in Hinduism and Islam. And
sorry, who's this?
APJ Abdul Kalam. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was the president of the country. He is not the president of the country. He was the president of the country earlier. Anyway, but even my friends who are, doing PhDs in my university with me, and some of them believe this stuff, and they're so firm about it. They start to argue about it, but they just don't know where to go with it, because the moment I mention something, say on Facebook or whatever, saying, how do people believe this? They automatically say, oh, it's not a literal definition, you're taking it too literally, it's this and that. And then I ask them, then why do you call yourself a Hindu in the first place? What makes a Hindu? If everything is just science, I forget the name of the person, the guy who makes a lot of money from this quantum babble. I forget his name. Have any of you guys heard of him?
Deepak Chopra, do you mean?
Yeah, that's the guy.
Him. That's the sort of theories they basically come up with to justify their Hindu beliefs, right?
Yeah.
They say, oh, it's not literal. You're taking it literally, blah, 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 blah. When you will them further, you realize that their beliefs are no different to what you originally expected them, because they're just not able to justify anything, right? And they basically just, are in a state of not thinking about it.
Yeah.
That's what I think. With someone like George Harrison, he was basically, in my opinion, mental, because he was literally having hallucinations of Krishna. Like that is really insane. So I can understand him believing in Krishna, but to scientifically arrive at Hinduism is just nonsensical. It's just that it's a non sequitur.
Yeah. It's funny that you brought this up when we're talking about Judaism. I get whenever you're a skeptic and you criticize Christianity, someone will send you a letter like, "Why don't you go after Islam?" When you criticize Islam, they say, "Why don't you go after Christianity?" And when you criticize both, they'll say, "Well, why don't you go after other religions like Judaism or Hinduism?" And typically because these Judaism and Hinduism are examples of religions that are a bit parochial and tend to follow an ethnic, their ethno-religious, divides. Since there's no evangelism, and there's this feeling like they're not really on our radar. But I mean, someone in the chat was saying they thought, Hinduism didn't seem to them to be a violent religion. There's if you root around in the text, you'll find some militant language if you dig around.
No, not just militant language. What is the religious book of the Hindus? It is the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
And what what is the Bhagavad Gita? It is the conversation between Chariot Krishna and his
Arjuna.
I don't know the word for it. What's the word for it? The warrior Arjun.
Yeah.
During a battle, and it's about how you conquer in battle while keeping your rights in a battle and so on and so forth. It's full of violence. The whole book is full of violence from start to finish. It's much worse than Islam or any other religion because it is from start to finish just violence and violence. That's what Bhagavad Gita is really.
Yeah, that was the thing is, I'd heard, before I read the Bhagavad Gita, everyone was saying, oh, it's this beautiful poem, and again, I think, much like Islam, you ask any Muslim evangelist, they're like, religion of peace, that's our official motto with the little logo, religion of peace, and then, Hinduism brands itself very similarly, in that they're always saying, oh, it's all about tranquility and meditation, and then I sat down and actually read the Bhagavad Gita, and I was amazed at what it actually contained. For those who don't know, just really quick, book report. These two factions have split this kingdom in a civil war. Some guy lost his kingdom into a game of dice or something. Honestly, I don't remember all the details, but there's this massive civil war, Game of Thrones style, between the Lannisters and the Starks. And the leader of the Starks, Arjun, he looks across the battlefield, and there's these two massive armies, and he sees a lot of people and he says, I know these people, I respect them, and he throws his bow to the ground and says, I'm not gonna, murder my kinsmen and so many people who I know to be virtuous. And then the god Krishna appears to him and says, no, it's fine, pick up your bow, everything will work out. So Arjun takes his advice, he goes in the battle, both armies are annihilated, Arjun's son gets killed, and nothing was resolved. Everything ends up back at square one. So I was amazed at the actual content of the book.
There's a little extra story to that as well, because who Arjun really is apparently. It's his mother's son and a god's son, basically. This is again the Immaculate Conception. He was born to one of the 10 most important gods, and so were 4 of his brothers to other gods apparently. That was her mother's excuse for having children while not being married. And the other side had one kid whose mother apparently found him floating in a river, and therefore they immediately thought, okay, he must be the son of the same woman, and he's the son of the sun god. So that they're all immaculately conceived, and of course so is Krishna.
I'm told.
Can I just take a moment to say that we're featured at the moment? So to anyone who's just passing through, this is the Gin and Tonic Show. We're an online panel discussion show. We talk about Islam and related topics, and the topic of this week is Jews and Muslims, or Judaism and Islam, the history and the way that they've interacted and interact. If you'd like to call in, just contact the Gin and Tonic Show as a Skype contact on Skype, and you can call in to ask questions and interact with us if you so please.
Okay, we've got a pretty big backlog of guests by now, so I'm going to have to say goodbye to Shantanu. Also, someone in the chat, Shantanu, said that my greeting you with namaste was somehow inappropriate. Is that true?
Not particularly, but I'll just normally in India we don't really greet each other with namaste at all. Like at least in my circle. So it's just seemed almost like it's like, how do I say? It's like if you were British, it would sort of be like saying, "Hi there, want a cup of tea?" kind of thing. It was like.
Oh, if you're Australian, g'day, mate.
But I know you don't mean any offense.
Yeah, okay, all right. Because I know that like everyone was saying "Salam alaikum" and trying to be cool when they were talking to Muslims or Arabs, and then I learned "Akhan," which was more like I guess a casual greeting, and they seem to appreciate that more. But anyway, so I just wanted to address that. I'm not.
No problem.
I don't have holes in my pillowcase.
You can say namaste. Just you. You can say it.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
Cheers. Take care.
Take care.
Okay. Wow, we got a lot of people here. remember, if anyone wants to join the show, just send a Skype contact request to the Gin and Tonic Show, and please wait for us to call you. We will bring you in when we're ready to have. See, someone just tried to call in, and I had to stop him, but we'll bring him in right now. Okay.
Just as a short explanation, what happened just now is we were comparing crazy contents in different religious books, and this led us to Hinduism, and this is why we got the call comparing different crazies.
Yeah. Welcome to the show.
Can you hear me?
Yes. What can we do for you?
Well, I left a comment, I believe it was 2 days ago on one of the Rationalizers video, the flat earth in the Quran thing. And he sent me a message asking me for my story, my deconversion.
Sure, go for it. It's great.
Yeah. So, I was brought up in a kind of liberal household. I had internet access when I was like 10, so I was a pretty open-minded guy. I used to watch shows like South Park and Family Guy ever since I was 10. So, and I learned about evolution pretty quickly, and I was actually trying to reconcile it with like the Adam and Eve stuff, and particularly because we always had religion classes in school in the Arabian capital that I come from. So, jump till I was around maybe 17. I had already had my doubts about that. And a friend of mine, an atheist friend of mine, confronted me about it and told me, like, do you actually believe this stuff? Do you believe in the Muhammad's trip when he dreamt and went to the Kaaba, and do you believe that people who reject Islam should be killed and like people's hands should be cut off? And it's something that really disturbed me, because I had always said I believed it due to peer pressure, but it wasn't something that I really felt it, I didn't have the conviction for it because I thought it was inherently wrong. So after that, I had like an agnostic year, where I just spent the whole year as an agnostic, just wondering out of fear of hell, and like, well, if I become an atheist, I'm gonna go to hell, and I'm not gonna like that. So that's kind of the only thing that kept me from just saying it out loud, like, yeah, I'm an atheist, So I left the country to study abroad, somewhere in Europe, and I just felt like I had the freedom to actually explore without, a family member walking in on the room on me, and stuff. So I had heard about like how some atheists thought that the Islam like was a proponent of the flat earth theory. So I just went in on YouTube and wrote in flat earth Quran, and I watched 2 videos. One of them was the Rationalizers video, which helped me a lot. And there was another video which I couldn't find when I went back to check for it. So it just amazed me how, a very good example of this is in Ramadan, where you have Muslims in maybe Egypt or Libya fasting until 7 p.m., and then Muslims in Northern Europe fasting until 9, until you get like up to the North Pole. And what do? Do they fast 22 hours a day, or do they fast like, do they standardize their time on somewhere else, or do they use the Mecca time, or and of course all the ridiculous stuff, the wife beating and the, which verse was it? You know the one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like,
Surah 4 verse 3?
No, it wasn't that one.
No, that's
34,
marriage.
yeah. 434, yeah.
Oh,
It's like, I've always had a problem with that, even as a child, So it's like, advise them then like don't have sex with them or something, and then beat them up is like, wow.
وَإِزْرِبُهُنَّ.
Yeah, اضربوهن. It's Arabic for beat them up. It's clearly, you go on the Arabic translation websites and they say like beat them, and then between brackets they'd say like lightly or some other apologetic, but it says beat them. There's no way around it. It's like,
Are you familiar with Hamza Yusuf?
No, I am not.
He says that in this case the word I forget the exact form, but from a daughter of, it's a man. He's a Western convert who's now an apologist for Islam, and he says well, many people translate this as to beat them, but that's not what it means. It means to assume an arrogant posture.
Oh, no. It means beat them. I speak Arabic, so
yeah.
I know.
Even from what little I know, I just nearly fell out of my chair.
No. When I actually have a fight with somebody, I'd say I'm hadrabak. I'm gonna beat you. So there's no way around it. It's just like, I'm gonna beat the, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm going to assume such an arrogant posture. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, if you look at a concordance, it's like all the different forms, and it's like punch, hit, kick, beat, thrash.
Yeah.
Nowhere.
And it doesn't say
Assume arrogant posture.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the first time I've heard that one. I've actually looked that up just today morning, and I saw an apologist saying like it means spank them.
Hey, wow.
And, yeah, I just literally fell on the floor and laughing. It's just spank them, and he's saying about how it doesn't just go for wives. It's also for if your daughter is being sexually promiscuous, so you have to spank her too.
What if that's what she's into? Could completely backfire. It's like that punishment. You catch your kid smoking, and then you say, well, now you're going to have to smoke a whole carton of cigarettes, and then they just, end up becoming a lifelong smoker, whereas they might have just... But I'm sorry, please go on. I have a habit of interrupting with consequential bullshit.
Fine. I hate going on for a long while anyway. Just where was I?
You said you had a problem with the verse
about... with all the ridiculous stuff. So I actually got a Quran and I opened it up and I started reading from it, and it's like from the second surah. I'll just leave the first one because it doesn't have much except, the hating on the Christians and the Jews. In case you didn't notice that part. So in the second part, it starts with like Alif Lam Mim, and that has absolutely no meaning. As a kid in the religion classes, we'd ask our sheikhs, and it's like, it's the miracle of the Quran. It's like nobody has yet been able to interpret this miraculous verse that, it's mad, and it has no meaning.
Yeah.
It's just like, and it's pronounced Alif Lam Mim, which is not even a word, it's like 3 letters. And it's actually repeated in a couple of other verses, not the exact same letters, but anyway, that's all irrelevant. You move on a little bit and you see the thing you talked about with the, like, beating the cow, or beating the dead guy with the cow bone so he can get up and talk about, and point out who his murderer was. In that very same surah, there's a part which says like Allah has made the unbelievers not believe, so He's sealed on their hearts and sealed their eyes and ears and whatever. Yeah, are you familiar with that one?
I am. That left quite an impression on me as well when I read it.
Yeah. So it's like
which is also along with the flat Earth stuff, is another misconception of the time, that people thought with their hearts. It was quite a common belief that the thoughts in your body originated from your heart, which is why when Egyptians were going through their afterlife trials, at the end of it, their hearts would be weighed to see if they were good or bad. Mm-hmm. People generally believe that you thought with your heart. So throughout the entire Quran, not once does it say, I've clouded their minds, I have confused their brains. Yeah. It always says, I've covered their hearts. What's that going to do? Give them palpitations? That's all it would do. That's yet another thing that he got wrong. But of course, it's now become part of everyday language.
It's
just
not
listen
literal.
to your heart. And the reason that it's become everyday language is that it was so commonly believed to be true that it's just how we say the sun rises and the sun sets. But it doesn't. It just becomes such a part of everyday language that people kind of assumed it was true. So the Quran got that wrong as well.
No, didn't get it wrong. That's like the magical, beautiful language of the poetic.
Yeah.
As the apologists
Yeah, sorry
would say.
to break your flow there.
Yeah.
Ijaz.
No.
Ijaz
No problem.
Yeah, like it says, like Mo says, it's another example of how every time it's wrong, it's really a miracle. I would have loved to have gone golfing with Muhammad, and he just hits it way out into the sand, and then I'm like, oh, too bad. And before I can finish, he's like, it's a miracle, and all of his friends are like, it's a miracle. I don't, what?
Yeah. There's also the whole embryology thing, which we took all that stuff. We had a religion class in school, so it's like every other day. And so we get the whole, the Quran predicted precisely the birth order, and I went on believing that until last year or a year and a half ago maybe, when I actually went on the internet and researched it. And it's like, that's not how it works. I saw a video like with PZ Myers and Hamza, what's his name?
Hamza Sources.
Never pronounced that. And the guy just humiliates him. So.
Yeah.
How did you accept this? Did if somebody said to you, okay, this is the miracle, did you ever think about it, or did you just say, aha, it's a miracle, thank you very much, next please?
Well, they sit us down in class, or like on the one-on-one religion classes also I had at home, and they say like, yeah, it's written in the Quran, and that's exactly how it goes down. And you just sit there like a 7 or an 8-year-old going, okay, miracle.
But they don't give you any text, any substantiation, any kind of literature which would enable you to see, well, hang on, isn't there something a little bit wrong here? They don't give you anything except the claim.
Yeah, they just give us the claim here. Here's the claim, go team. They never really give us like, okay, and here's an article from like Scientific Magazine or whatever that proves our point. It's just like, yeah, Muhammad said it and it's true.
Okay, so the point that I'm trying to make here is the apologists who then go and say, well, this guy, he was an advisor to Jimmy Carter, and in his book Earth, he also says that the mountains have roots and blah, blah, blah. You don't get that kind of thing at all. You just get the assertion.
Yeah, we never get the apologetics. We just get the assertion, and then they let us loose on the world to be humiliated.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Well, but
yeah.
I mean, you won't be humiliated as long as you're in a group that believes that they all believe, and that's really the power of the religious dogma is if you're in a room with people who believe in unicorns, you're not an idiot,
Yeah.
Unless you don't believe in unicorns, and then you're.
Well, I'm sorry. Go on.
And then the Bible says the fool in his heart says that there are no unicorns.
Or dragons.
Yeah.
There are also dragons in the Bible. So.
There's that website. Is it Sunny QA or something where you ask a question and they do fatwas saying, giving you the
Islam
official.
QA.
Yeah. And I had a look on there at some point, and there was someone had asked if it's halal to eat unicorns. They went into this long answer about, well, I can't even remember whether it was okay or not, but but they actually accepted it, put it on as a serious answer, came up with this scholarly research about unicorns and stuff, and then gave a ruling. It's like, I'd have just said, tell you what, next time you find a unicorn, call me, and then I'll look into it for you. I wouldn't have wasted my time. Actually, talking about these miracles and stuff, someone had, I'd met some proselytizers in the city centre years ago, and I did a video chat with him on my channel, and he wrote to me recently and asked how the call went with Nadir Ahmed, and he hadn't seen it, and he said, did he mention the miracle of Iran? And I said, what miracle is that? He said, how he talked about the pillars of Iram, and Muhammad talks about the pillars of Iram in the Quran, and they recently found this city of Iram, and it had these big pillars. And you know, it's like, how can that be a miracle? It's like Pompeii was destroyed approximately the same time as Iram. Does that mean anyone who ever talks about Pompeii is a messenger from God? Because otherwise, how could they ever have heard of Pompeii? You know, if a city disappears into the ground, then it's going to be the wrath of God story. It's going to become legend. People in the area are going to know. And essentially the argument was, someone a long, long time ago knew something about a thing a long, long time ago. That must be a miracle. And Lawrence of Arabia used to call it the Atlantis of the desert. And he called it that because he knew that it had sunk into the ground. And that's exactly what happened. I think it was built over there was water under there or something. I don't know if they've worked out exactly why it happened. But Lawrence of Arabia basically knew why it disappeared. It fell into the ground. The Quran doesn't say that. So, and it hadn't been discovered then. So is Lawrence of Arabia a messenger of God? Because how could he possibly have known what happened to the place? He must have been, God must have told him. But the thing that it led me to spot was, in the Quran, it says that it had pillars that had never been seen anywhere else in the world. But that's utterly rubbish, because by then the Chinese were already building the Great Wall of China. The Egyptians had made buildings with absolutely massive pillars on them. Pillars on buildings were not a new thing.
Yeah,
We're only talking like, 100 BCE or something like that. It clearly says that Iram had pillars that existed nowhere else like these big pillars. And yet if you look at history, they existed all over the bloody place. So it's an outright statement of fact that's in error in the Quran. It was just another thing that I spotted the other day that was a load of rubbish.
Yeah, I think
you carry on because you're more interesting than me. I tend to think and then open my mouth.
Actually, that takes me back to one of my lessons, and there are many cities who got the wrath of God. There were the pillar people, and Sodom and Gomorrah, as everybody knows this.
And Thamud.
Oh yeah. What I really want to get is, I actually saw, when you asked me to call on the show, I went back and saw your last episode with Nadir, his name. And all of his arguments are basically the same. It's like, I'm gonna look for a word that I can, use up to, an irrelevant piece of junk information from the Quran, and then translate it into something like an explained scientific phenomena, and then everything's good. It's like when you ask him what kind of barrier it is, what does it do, what's its relevance? It's just a barrier. Whatever, anything else is irrelevant. Of course, it's not irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's if you're gonna say there's a barrier, you gotta say what it does.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is, if it really is a prophetic book, then no one should shy away from using it to extrapolate something.
Yeah, it reminds me of this funny term, like it's called the backronym. It's like when you have an acronym and then you try to explain it to something that it didn't mean originally. So it's like Pepsi. We had this rumor in the Arabian area that said like it's called "Pay Every Penny to Save Israel," which was really stupid.
Yeah,
seems legit.
Yeah, exactly. And they got the grammar wrong on that one too. Yeah, so it's like the Quran is just this big book of things that are waiting to happen when you make them happen. It's like you see something that happens, like, oh yeah, it's right there. It says here like the barriers between seas, and then the seas. Yeah, and then I'm sorry, Rationalizer, I can't hear you.
Oh, my mic's not on. I'm just talking to my wife.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so it's like the barrier that's waiting between the seas or whatever. It's just ridiculous. And then you have your prophetic claims, which are just, sometime in the future, something's gonna happen. And if it doesn't happen, you're gonna say, well, it just didn't happen yet. Maybe it's like exactly with the leather shield thing. It's like, if it hadn't happened, and you'd say, well, now we're in 2012 and we have technology and nobody uses shields. It's like, you never know. There might be a post-apocalyptic situation where all the weapons are gone now, and then we're going to get invaded by shield-bearing sandal warriors on horses,
So, that changes everything, because before it says, okay, you're going to fight people who have faces like leather and eyes like locusts. Maybe it wasn't really a racist description of a Central Asian people. Maybe after the fallout, there will be a race of mutants with like primitive Mad Max style weaponry, like, using just spears and shields, and maybe that's really what the Quran's talking about. We don't know.
That would make a great movie.
I would include all the religious themes too. It would be the most bizarre. I think only Quentin Tarantino would direct Muslims versus mutants after the apocalypse.
I just want to quickly make a point, because I remember when I was watching the show, the last show when I wasn't there, obviously, when you were against Nadir, he said something about the Hadiths and how the Hadiths talk about the Mongols and their leather shields. Everyone had leather shields. The Romans had leather shields. The Celts had leather shields. Everyone had leather shields. So he made this big point about it being, only the Mongols. No. Everyone had leather shields.
Are you sure that's right? I think the Byzantines...
Yeah. No, they stopped using metal shields. They were using leather ones.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yep.
And then the Persians,
Google Books says so.
The Persians would use wood or thatched shields, didn't they?
Let's have a look.
I mean, what kind of shield they use is kind of irrelevant. He could have just say, like, in 600 years the Mongols were invaded, and then we'd actually have to believe him, because, like, that's an actual prophecy. So, like, 600 years the king was gonna be called, like, whatever.
If the deadline is the end of time, it's not a prophecy, because it's unrestricted. Okay, here's my prophecy. One day a pig named Darren will have 3 heads and work in a computer office. And it'll happen sometime between now and the end of the universe. There you go.
It's actually, they
disprove
say
that one.
I think I read it somewhere on the internet, and just take this with a grain of salt, because not everything you read on the internet is true. But it's like, if you have something that is possible to happen, like an infinitesimal probability that it will happen, and you have an infinite time, then it's gonna happen inevitably. So if you say, like, in the future this tower in a country far, far away will fall, there's probably gonna be a tower in a country far, far away that will fall. It's prophecy 101, and then you have the self-fulfilling prophecies, which is like
the Zionist Jews, for example, who they read and it says you'll reconstruct Israel, and they go, oh, that's a good idea, let's give it a go. That kind of and then
the signs of the end times.
I mean, the prophecies, the Romans will win against the Persians in a few years. Like, what is this, a horoscope? Yeah. I'm sorry, but he knows to the exact nanosecond the point that, what was his name, Heracles, or I can't remember what his name.
Heracles
will receive the signature of peace. He knows to the nanosecond, and yet the best he can do, can't even mention the month or the year, or, it will be on a Tuesday, where there's even a 1 in 7 chance of getting it right. No. It'll happen sometime within about the next 9 years. You're clever, aren't you? Most people familiar with Roman war tactics of the time could have come up with that. And the miracle that it's supposed to be in the lowest land. I'm sorry, but the lowest land was the Dead Sea. I don't think they had a battle in the Dead Sea. They had it somewhere else. So if they're going to say it says the lowest land, it wasn't the Dead Sea. They had the battle, was it?
No, there was one battle in the Dead Sea, but they had heaps and heaps of battles.
Is that where the Romans were victorious?
No, it was in
No.
Jerusalem.
So, oh no, hang on. The Romans have been defeated in the lowest land. The thing
but even if there was, I mean, the difference between defeated and victorious is a single stroke.
it's like
a single aleph.
It's a vowel, basically, and there were no vowels. You just change U to E or something.
And given that the Quran was written after the frickin' event happened, it's not a prophecy, because the Quran was written, Quran's recording history. It's not actually making a prophecy, because the Quran wasn't written until after the event happened.
I also talked to a geologist, one of the so-called Quran miracle people, scientists who says the Quran's got miracles in, Pete Palmer, where he was saying what really happened, and I asked him about this, and he said, well, I don't know if he said it on camera or this other part was before we went on. He said, well, Romans used to build aqueducts that went for such distances with such minimal declines for the water to travel downhill over large distances. They were very good at working out levels. So they had tools for evaluating levels. It's not beyond the comprehension of anyone to accept that people were able to determine that this place is quite low down. That's it. And you call it...
I'll tell you something that actually could be called a miracle, is that the Greeks calculated the accurate, was it circumference of the earth?
Yeah.
Yeah, Al-Mamun had the same thing done.
No, Eratosthenes.
They never claimed to be
using sticks.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a fascinating story.
Yeah, that is far more miraculous than anything.
If I remember it correctly, I'm trying to remember what Carl Sagan told me. Eratosthenes.
Guys, come on, we had science 3 shows ago. Let's not get stuck on science now.
No, sorry. No, there's always a short amount of time available for some real science. And then I think he worked at the Library of Alexandria, or he was near there or something, and he opened a scroll and he mentioned the phenomenon of a well, I think it was, in some town where at an exact time, high noon, on an exact date, there is no shadow. The sun is directly ahead and all shadows point directly down. And there's no shadow in this well, I think it was. And Eratosthenes thought that was quite interesting. He waited for that date and time, stuck a stick where he was in the ground, and it had a shadow of a certain distance. So what he did is I don't know if the distance was already known or if he paid someone to measure the distance from where he was to this other place. And then by working out that the other place would be directly under the sun and his place would be at a slight angle because of the shadow, he worked out how much of an angle on a circle that is, and based on the distance here, he was able to work out what the circumference of the entire circle would be, and obviously came to the conclusion the Earth must be spherical, otherwise all of the shadows would have been straight down. So just the guy used a known distance and 2 sticks and measured the shadow, and he came up with the circumference of the Earth to something within 40 kilometres accuracy or something. Now that's clever stuff. That's far more impressive than anything I've seen in any religious book. And the guy didn't say, a magic man with 100 invisible wings told me. He said, I just used a couple of sticks.
Yeah, and that's far more miraculous than anything that has ever been mentioned in the Quran. Take, for example, also the temple in Egypt that had the statue of a king inside, and the day of his birth and coronation, the sun would shine in on his face inside the temple. But then on the other days it wouldn't. So that was like as a memorial to this king. So that is also, they used astronomy, they used math to calculate it, and that's far more impressive. And it was a lot of centuries before Muhammad even came. So Islam is just...
one of the weeks, guys, we're gonna have to do an episode talking about the Antikythera device, because it just absolutely blows my mind what what was achieved.
I'm gonna leave Mo in because there's still stuff I want to ask him, but I'm gonna bring in our next guest because we have 2 more people waiting. But go ahead and really quick, what is the Catherian device?
The Antikythera device.
Ancient computer.
It was discovered about 100 years ago, and it was very difficult to work out what it did. This is a really short version of it, but eventually it was worked out that. Mountain Wolf, would you mute your blog TV, please? It was worked out essentially that it was like it was basically the world's first ever computer, 2,000 years BCE, and it was the world's first ever computer. Was it that long? No, 2,000 years ago. So it was around like 50 BCE or something. It was effectively the world's first ever computer, right? It was a clockwork device, cogs, everything. And from a geocentric point of view, it would predict the positions of planets. So they'd move around a dial, but they wouldn't just go around. The planets would go slow down, go backwards a bit, and then they'd carry on again because they thought that everything was geocentric. And this device does it. It caters for the elliptical nature of the moon, all sorts of stuff. I'll go into it more another time. But it predicted solar and lunar eclipses hundreds of years into the future. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. We'll do it another time, and I'll just get really excited about it.
Jack, welcome back to the show. What do you have for us today?
Hello. Your topic is about Jewish and Arabs, but you're talking about something else now.
Yeah, well, you can talk about whatever. I mean, you can get us back on topic or get us on a completely different, or talk about what we're talking about now.
Okay, I'm going to talk about Jewish and Arabs.
Okay.
Historically. First, Arabs is, the name Arabs is, we don't know what's the meaning of Arabs because it's different. Because now Arabs means the people who identify themselves as Arab. But historically, it's the beginning of Islam in Hijaz, or in what's known today as Saudi Arabia. After the beginning of Islam, they immigrated or they conquered the other places, like in Levant and Iraq and North Africa. But I think the Arabs, the meaning of Arabs means the nation that was formed after in the beginning of Islam. There was a nation was formed, and they was called after that Arabs. And the name Arabs in the Semitic language means nomads. That's even in the Quran, Arabs. In the Quran, they name Arabs nomads. The meaning of Arabs means nomads. Okay, so. But after the beginning of Islam, there was all the Semitic people, in Iraq and Syria and everywhere. They identified themselves as Arabs because other Semitic people, they are very close to the Hijaz people, so they easily become Arabs because the other Semitic people, they are very close to Arabs in their language, culture, and genetically everything. So they became Arabs. So the meaning of Arabs doesn't mean any Arab from Hijaz or from Arabian Peninsula. No. Arab is just a nation that formed just after Islam from the combination of all Semitic people, from Iraq, from Syria, from Egypt, and everywhere. And the Jewish people, they are Semitic, but they didn't become Arab because they are very strong to their religion, and but they are still Semitic because we can know that because of their language. The Hebrew language is a Semitic language. And also genetically, and recent studies, G, haplogroup G, it's assigned to the Semitic people, and it's in Arabs and also in Jewish haplogroup is like more than 50%.
So you just, well, you got to be careful where you say that. I'm sure, you know, someone in the chat a while ago posted that they thought that among Jewish people there wasn't quite as much hatred towards you know, Muslims and Arabs as there was the other direction. I don't know where you'd get in more fistfights saying that Jews and Arabs have a lot of common ancestry, but it's there's a lot of places where I wouldn't say that. I'd say no, that's all right. I mean, you can get in a fight in Korea by saying that Koreans and Japanese have a lot of the same ancestors. So I can only imagine if you're in a bar in Ramallah. You know, just
such a bar exists.
Yeah.
But are you saying that it's been proven that Jews and Arabs are ethnically related?
Yes.
The freaking holy books already admit it. Like, Muhammad already said that.
Because hatred doesn't have nothing to do with the fact, because facts is subjective. Because Arabs and Jewish, they have a common ancestor. It's proven because of the common language and genetically. But if they hate each other, so what we can do?
But the thing is that I would say that this is not Arabs and Jews. This is Muslims and Jews. So I mean, hey, but I mean, like, you know, it's not historically that Arabs haven't liked Jews, it's Muslims haven't liked Jews, because Jews were treated the same way as they were treated in Arab lands in Persia. They were treated the same way in Central Asia, all kinds of really nasty laws and discrimination and so forth. Actually, should we go into Dhimmi and the Dhimma, and that sort of thing, since this is the subject of the show?
Yeah,
kind of.
sure.
Alright, essentially, Muhammad was, you know, doing his thing in Arabia, and he wasn't getting along with the Jews very well. And so at one point he decided to go and conquer this Jewish town called Khaybar, which was like a series of fortified forts, I suppose you could say. Just like a settlement, really. And so he marches off and he conquers Khaybar. As he's conquering one stronghold after another, and he's killing all the men, and he's distributing the women and children as slaves amongst his followers. And then there's two more, when there's only two strongholds left, the Jews there negotiate with Muhammad a deal, a pact, a dhimma, which is that basically they'll work the land for him, and in exchange Muhammad demanded from them 50% of all of their produce every year, and also he demanded that they had to, whenever he wanted to, whenever he chose, he could just kick them straight off the land. And this is the dhimma, and this is where the sort of like the whole dhimmi system comes from originally. And so Muhammad began to sort of make similar rules. Basically, you could live as a Christian or a Jew under his rule as long as you were basically a second-class citizen, a tributary. And then after his death, of course, the Arab Muslim empire expands out, and we have the conquests of, you know, the Levant and Mesopotamia with very large Jewish and Christian. Well, I mean, it wasn't until 200 years afterwards, I would say, that really the large population of the Middle East actually converted to Islam. So most people were Christians and Jews. And so you have a real codification of these dhimmi rules. And even though it's fake, even though it's not real, it is interesting to look at the Pact of Umar first. Essentially, it's apocryphal, but it's a historical document that supposedly relates the pact that Umar bin al-Khattab, the second Muslim emperor after Muhammad, Khalifa. Yeah, the deal he made with basically the rules he set down that non-Muslims, like Christians and Jews, had to follow. And they include things like they're not allowed to build churches or monk cells or convents anywhere near the quarters of Muslims. They're not allowed to teach their children to read the Quran. They're not allowed to convert anyone to their religions or publicly preach about their religions. They're all this kind of they're not allowed to ride horses. They can't bear arms, and so on and so forth. All kinds of really silly, petty kind of rules.
They can't repair the churches. They can't. There's something like they can't have a procession in the street, like candles and.
All this
they
kind
can't
of stuff.
repair their churches after basically.
Under some of the less tolerant governors and caliphs, they actually had a dress code where certain cloaks and hats or other insignia had to be worn by Christians and Jews to differentiate them.
No, that was always happening.
I think there was some. I mean, there
some
was
were worse. Like there was a caliph in Egypt, Fatimid, who actually made Christians and Jews wear giant metal crosses and stars. But that was a crazy exception. But generally, the funny clothing has always been there. That was always what Jews and Christians, especially Jews, had to wear. Like in Morocco and North Africa and it's Egypt and Persia. It's always that kind of code has always been in place. That wasn't especially in one period. I mean, in Yemen, they had to wear rags. Up until like the 50s, or when all the Yemeni Jews were frisked out of Yemen to Israel to be safe after the Israeli war and all the fallout from that. I mean, up until that point, as far as I remember, it was customary, it was traditional for Jews of Yemen to have to wear rags. So.
Yeah, and because Yemen, before Christ, Yemen used to be a Jewish nation.
That's right. That's right.
Are you sure about that? I mean...
Yes, a very long time ago, before Muhammad, Yemen was very heavily populated by Jews, but they ended up a lot of them ended up converting to Christianity. It became a Christian region, but there was still a heavy Jewish presence, there was.
The other side of the coin is, nowadays, of course, there's, this stark perceived genetic divide. I mean, like what Jack mentioned, the shared haploid groups between, Jews and Arabs. And then, Klingschor said, well, this is more about the religious doctrines. From what I've read at the time, the Jews and Arabs saw each other as fellow Semites. And it was the religious division alone, primarily, that divided them. And because, I mean, it seems, because, from what I've studied, at first, there were, obviously, there were times where he, in his very early career, where he fought shoulder to shoulder with, Jewish tribes, and was involved in their politics and treated them, more or less as colleagues. And then later on, some of the caliphs were more tolerant than others, under, some of the Umayyad caliphs. They weren't as orthodox, they didn't care as much, and you had a lot of Christians and Jews rising to relatively prominent places in the court, which is kind of by necessity to a degree, because you have a warrior people without a large base of scholarship. They need bureaucrats and so forth. So
that's right. All the rulers, all the aristocrats, all their children were educated by. They would employ Jews and Christians to educate their children. All the doctors initially were Jews and Christians. All the secretaries, all the intellectuals were all Jews and Christians in the Umayyad era. I mean, and then that's something interesting that, like, the Dhimmi system, I mean, in the classical rules that were developed by the jurists based upon these so-called historical accounts like the Pact of Umar that I was talking about before. By the way, that's the first Umar, because there were two Umars. There's an Umayyad caliph called Umar, and then there's Umar bin al-Khattab. I was thinking about Umar bin al-Khattab. A lot of people would think that I meant the other one. No, it's the other one. in the dhimmi system, a dhimmi is meant to have no authority over a Muslim, no position of authority. But I mean, this was always broken, this rule. I mean, like many caliphs had, Jewish doctors and physicians, or Jewish. I mean, for example, in Al-Andalus, there was one famous Jew. His name was, let's see if I can remember, Hasday bin Shabrut. No, I lie. It's Samuel bin Naghila. And he was murdered, and then there was a massive anti-Jewish pogrom, and thousands of Jews were slaughtered. This was in Al-Andalus, by the way. But before that, for like decades before that, Samuel bin Naghila was a general, a Jewish general who was like in charge of a Muslim kingdom. So, I mean, even though he was eventually someone murdered him, there was these pogroms, it is very noteworthy to note that he was the ruler, the governor rather, the vizier. He was a Jew, was leading Muslim armies, was in such a high position of authority in a Muslim nation. So it's interesting to see how these rules would often be obscured. Like, sometimes rulers would go further than the rules, like the one in Jews and Christians having to wear giant iron crosses and stars. And other times rulers would be lax and Jews would become very powerful, as would Christians.
Yeah, that seems the pattern from what I read, is someone more tolerant would come into power in one of the regional dynasties, and things would vary, and sometimes you'd have Jews or other minorities moving from one kingdom to another based on who was who's persecuting people the least. And then you have, Maimonides had to flee his city in Spain after he wrote Guide for the Perplexed, but I think he went to a more, I guess, liberal for the time Muslim state, because he did something really stupid. If anyone's looked through the Guide for the Perplexed, he writes criteria for someone to be a religious prophet, and it's pretty obvious that Muhammad didn't meet those criteria, and it seems almost like a deliberate jab at him, which is pretty dumb. If you're gonna take a jab at Muhammad, flee to the worst Christian country rather than anywhere in the Muslim world. That was pretty ballsy of him. I'm surprised that he didn't get killed right off the bat. Okay, so thanks for your input, Jack. Take care. I'm gonna remove you for now. So long.
The thing with the dhimmi status as well, it was the affair of Fadak, wasn't it? That brought this about. It was the
Jews of Fadak.
After attacking the people of Khaybar, the people of Fadak came to him and they didn't want to be attacked. So they said, all right, Fadak's yours. There you go. Don't come and kill us. You can have it for nothing. And they said, but can we stay and work the land, and we'll keep some of it and give the rest to you. And they agreed, along with the other stuff, not building churches or whatever. Non-Muslims aren't allowed to build houses where the roofs are higher than Muslims' houses and things like this. They agreed that they would give Muhammad 50% of everything that they produced. And this was Muhammad's personal property and not war booty, because they didn't have to fight for it. So Muhammad took this as his personal property. And people say, Muhammad died and he died a really poor man. And it's like, well, he may have lived a very simple, non-materialistic life, but to say that he was poor when he owned 50% of a village, that is just utterly misleading. There's no poverty in that. I don't even own the house that I'm in. Muhammad owned more than me. I've got 2 cars. The guy was not poor. He may have lived a frugal life, but that doesn't mean he was poor. He outright owned the whole of Fadak and took 50% of it as tax. Do you remember there was something that I think atheists were doing, and they called them brights? Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Yeah. And it was like they were trying to imply that if you're an atheist, you're more intelligent than other people, so they called themselves brights. And I remember a video actually by someone that I don't like, but I did enjoy the title. It was, I'd rather be a bright than a dimmy.
Well, I think the
Funny.
I think the
But I
bright.
was going to quickly say,
Khaybar,
the Khaybar was the first one. It was the Jews at Khaybar, and then when the Jews at Fadak heard what had happened at Khaybar, they came to get a similar deal with what Muhammad had established at Khaybar. So it happened at basically the same time, but Khaybar was where initially the idea was formed. And the Jews next door in Fadak, when they saw what was happening, they got in to try and get protection as well, and not get attacked and massacred. Okay.
Yeah, I think that it was Dawkins that came up with the bright label, and he just was unhappy with the stigma surrounding the term atheist, because there was just such a low opinion of it in some places, and people would think of being an atheist like being a vampire. I personally kind of find it amusing just to find myself inadvertently in the most hated group, at least, or most mistrusted group in the United States. Because, I mean, I don't know, just being rebellious, I guess it appeals to me. I could just go boo and scare people. It was funny because, like, they did this poll, this is now infamous, you've probably read this a bunch of times on various forums of skepticism or atheism, where they said, a few days after the 9/11 attacks, they took a poll of the U.S. population and said, okay, well, who do you trust and who do you mistrust? And all the way down the list, atheists were dead last, right behind Muslims. And this was when, hysteria, the global jihad, they're all out to get us. And I thought, wow, what the fuck did we do in recent memory? I mean, you'd think that we would at least be ahead of them just temporarily, and then it would settle back down to the bottom. So I think that we should be able to blow up any two buildings of our choice with complete impunity, okay? Because we didn't do anything wrong, but we've already got the stigma.
The atheists have done something much, much worse. You're obviously not up to date with modern news.
French Revolution.
Stem cell research is what atheists have done. Atheists are killing babies on the altar of the God science.
Yeah.
That is what is happening. How many innocent babies must be slaughtered on that altar?
So, we got Captain Disguise with us today. Welcome to the program. What can we do for you?
Hey guys.
Hi.
I actually wanted to say something about the topic, the Jewish-Muslim relations, but I just want to make a comment about what Rationalizer said about how Muhammad gave up a lot of his wealth and money and stuff. And, I'm sure a lot of that is just propaganda, biased Islamic propaganda, just to make him, look really good. But other than that, you kind of have to understand what the context was. Muhammad probably didn't really care for the money. First of all, he was rich because he married Khadija, so he did have an experience of what, being rich was like. But then he was gonna get like 100,000 followers who would do anything he wants. The entire economic system was gonna be under his control, so it's not like he really cared for gold or, the currency or whatever. So yeah, that could be something.
Exactly. What is the purpose of money, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What does money give you? Money itself doesn't give you anything. What it does is indirectly, by being able to distribute it in any way you see fit, it gives you power. You can control people, have things that you want. All right? So, what could Muhammad possibly have wanted that money could have bought him? Nothing. Couldn't have bought him anything. All right? He was the first prophet that Allah ever said could collect war booty. Come on. I was like, Allah has made a special permission for me. When we go and kill people, I'm allowed to rob their stuff. So he can go and have that.
I can marry my son's daughter.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can marry a 9-year-old because I had a dream where an angel revealed her to me wrapped up in silk cloth.
And I can have more than this. Yeah, we can only have 3 wives or 4 wives, but except Muhammad, special treat for you. Good lad, you can have more than that. I mean, even though you can have women as war booty as well. You know, you may want to marry more because that's the respectable thing to do. So I'll let you marry 9. Yeah, there's all this stuff. Muhammad didn't want money. It's people just thinking in modern times. Just like when they say Muhammad was illiterate. So what? People didn't learn through literacy then. They learned through oral transition. They're comparing people by modern methods.
Transmission.
And in modern methods, money matters. If you're already running the place, you don't need any cash. If you are literally in a position where you can say to someone, all right, there's only 20 of you, go and fight those 200 people or go and fight those 2,000 people. You are definitely going to die, but I need you to go and fight them, and you'll be rewarded when you're dead. And those people are going to go and do it. They're going to lay down their lives for you. What the hell do you need cash for? You don't need it at all.
I think it's unanimous that even if that's true, his personal fortune was moot. Now, as far as him like living frugally, you know, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I mean, I can understand Captain's perspective that you got to take all stories with a grain of salt. But I don't want to have it too obvious of a double standard, because I use a lot of the meaner stories about Muhammad against him. So I can't just say I have to allow at least a few of the flattering ones in the interest of fairness.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it was completely selfish. You know, I'm pretty sure he helped a lot of poor people because, you know, his basic revolution was based on the poor people. You know, they were the majority, so he wanted their support. So, you know, I can understand that. He was kind of a socialist.
Yeah, Ibn Ishaq says that at the time of the Hijrah, the majority of Muhammad's followers were poor people.
Yeah.
Like, of course they were. Like, Muhammad, it's not like Muhammad was a magical exception to, you know, the way that human societies works. It's always the poor and the downtrodden who get attracted to a radical new ideology that will help them, you know. It's, of course.
Yeah, I remember in the hadith about Heraclius's 1 hour conversion, they made a big deal about how it was like class warfare, basically. The poor followed him in his rallying cry against the wealthy traders, and it seemed like I think a lot of maybe a large part of why the message spread so fast was that he sort of marketed it as kind of Bolshevism in a sense, you know what I mean? Down with the aristocracy and down with the bourgeoisie. That certainly
only in Mecca though. When he moved to Medina, it was all about the booty. I mean, early Muslim sources admit this. Like, fucking Urwa bin al-Zubair, earliest recorded mention of the Battle of Badr. And what does he say, you know? We went to fight Abu Sufyan, like the big Meccan caravan, with nothing in our minds but of the booty. Like, there's no contest. I mean, it was all about the money.
The peaceful verses. There's the verses, Muhammad had a handful of followers verses. Oh, we should all get along. We shouldn't fight. We're all the same. We're like Smarties. We're the same on the inside, just different colours on the outside, and all this stuff. And then he moves out, and two groups of bandits say, "Oh, we'll follow you." Normally, you know, we just go around ransacking places, having sex with women, taking booty. So, what's your orders? Muhammad, we should just generally do a bit of ransacking, booty, having sex stuff.
Somebody in the chat made a inquiry as to whether I'd ever played World of Warcraft, and I have. And anyone who's played those games knows, if you've ever been a raid leader, especially if you have to do full or partial pickup groups, if you need 25 people or even 10 to go in and do something, they will not do it unless you make clear what the reward is. Okay, it really is. If you've ever played the game, I can fully empathize with Muhammad because it's like grabbing this motley crew of bandits and trying to get them into some kind of cohesive fighting force, and it's such a headache. And the moment, I mean, you know, people get in there, and the moment it becomes clear that they won't get at least their fair share, if not more, they just ditch. There's this one, I'm not going to go too far into the WoW stuff, but there's this one area, there's 4 of these giants that you can kill, and people would just go straight to the one that has the best reward, down him, and then everybody just ditches. And I even got one time I got like the main tank and the healer. I said, okay guys, we're gonna take down the whole thing so we can get the achievement for clearing the whole dungeon. And they said, oh yeah, we promise. And then they had their fingers crossed because they just went right in there. Even though I was raid leader, I had no control. They just completely ignored me. They all took this guy down and then ditched. So I think that the human I mean, I know it's just a game, but the pattern there of human behavior being incentivized by personal short-term gain is one of those timeless universal principles. And I think he would just got frustrated with getting meek and mild people who got persecuted were fleeing to the other the Ghassanid areas because the persecution was too bad. And then he says, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to get the biggest, meanest, baddest people on my side, and we'll just kick the shit out of everyone. And then we'll see who's laughing then.
Who gets the sword of Azeroth?
Yeah. The sword of 1,000 truths.
On a USB. Do you mean that they weren't fleeing to Ghassanid territories, they were fleeing to Abyssinia?
Some of them fled to, different places, yeah.
The thing I want to point out, yeah, but I'm not aware that Muhammad got a big bandit band on his side. He went to Yathrib, and from Yathrib, him and his followers began to launch raids against the Meccans. I think he just I don't think there was this big. I mean, this was very common Arab warfare.
No, it was the two. I don't remember the names, but there were
Ansari
two. Basically,
and
they were the warring parties, weren't they? And
yeah,
they agreed to make peace.
Yeah, it seems. Yeah, but I mean, you can imagine what sort of person he attracted if you had followers from different tribes coming to join him. It seems like the environment in Arabia around those centuries was like the Caribbean during the age of privateering, wherein pirates, fought on the behalf of a nation, and they fought under the protection and license of a nation, but they were doing it for the loot. And then the nation giving them the letters of marque just said, well, as long as you attack Spanish ships, we're fine with it. And it seems like a very similar atmosphere where there was a blur of the line between and they were like land privateers, I guess. Maybe in some regards, I would say that the bandit label might be a bit more pejorative, to be fully accurate, but I mean, it was banditry at the end of the day. It was banditry,
but they weren't bandits. The people who he was, what I mean is that it wasn't like he got a big pirate band with him. It was that these were his followers. These were his followers from, this was a combination of his followers from back from Mecca, and also all these, and mostly, I think, these new converts in Yathrib. What they were doing is they were engaging in the same kind of raiding warfare that they had always engaged in.
So that's what I mean. I'm not saying that they were bandits at the time. I'm not not saying they were bandits at the time. I'm just saying that, I'm calling them by today's standards, they were bandits. Yeah. It was I think at the time, because of the limited resources and so on, it was fairly common that people would be running short on food or something, so they'd go and raid someone else, and they'd come back and do a revenge raid and stuff like this. So, by their standards, they were all just normal people. It's just that, if people were doing it to the corner shop down the road today, they'd be bandits. That's what I meant.
I have one question. Someone asked me in text. Captain's our last caller. I'll just keep him and Mo in. Here's the question. He says, when you guys get a moment, could you explain the logic behind claiming the Jewish matriarchs as Muslims? This person says, I've seen this claimed in tracts, but the logic behind, as poorly explained by commenting YouTubers, has left me scratching my head. So Jewish matriarchs. I don't know if they meant to say, I know the practice of,
I have never heard of a Jewish matriarch. I think he must be a patriarch.
It's just a typo.
Yeah, so. Maybe.
No, there were a lot of matriarchal communities. I mean, we still have them today down in the south. So, yes, they did have the structures.
Yes, but he's not. There's no matriarchy. There's no Jewish matriarchy.
I've just got a confirmation. He did mean patriarch.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the matriarchy exists, but there's no Jewish matriarchy. Yeah, look, I mean, the patriarchs go hand in hand with the prophets in Judaism. You can't really have one without the other. It just goes with the whole Islam, setting itself up as a legacy to Judaism. It's just natural to include all these significant figures, prophets, bad guys like the Pharaoh and Shaitan, and patriarchs.
Well, I mean, okay, before the show we were talking, and you said that Abraham had the distinction of being the first Jew, and I wonder, do Muslims? Because I talked to a guy, he was Israeli Arab, and he said he was very insistent that Jesus was not a Jew. So it seems like the mentality is that what constitutes a Jew was an offshoot of a group, but Judaism started much later, and Judaism represents a late-term distortion of Jewish scripture instead of a tradition going on.
Actually, that is true, sort of. The religion that we call Judaism today developed probably at the same time as Christianity. Basically, Christianity and Judaism are both offshoots from Judaism.
Uh-huh.
It's confusing because we still call Judaism, but the Judaism we have today is rabbinical Judaism, not biblical Judaism.
Yeah,
So they don't follow the Bible. They don't. They don't read the Bible. They follow the Talmud. They
right.
follow
So
the
it seems like Muslims date the birth of rabbinical Judaism as the actual Judaism. Before that, it was Islam. And then it became. See, the funny thing is,
that's basically what it is. It's at the early stages, Islam was a concept. Islam was simply believing that there is only one God, Allah, and that you should worship him, and that was Islam in the early days. I suppose Adam would have been the first Muslim, or maybe if you made some angels before, then they might have been, unless of course you have to have free will. In which case, I suppose some jinn were probably the first Muslims. But basically, if you believed in Allah as only one and they should be worshipped, then you were a Muslim automatically. But then, over time, rules and regulations were introduced through Judaism and so on and so on. And then Muhammad came effectively as the one to confirm this is exactly what Allah wants. It's like, I've come to give you the rules and regulations. You've got to take your left shoe off first. This kind of stuff. So the concept of being a Muslim is different in a way. It's still Islam. You're still a Muslim simply by believing. I think now that you have to accept Muhammad as a messenger, I'm not certain. Because if you say that you only believe in one God, they will say you are a Muslim then. It's just that you're not a practicing Muslim, and that's a different thing. So that's what they do by claiming that they were all Muslims from the start.
Yeah,
but they just forgot the word.
And Muslims also have a belief in a group of people called the Hanifs. These are basically the Muslims before Muhammad. So they would say that Ibrahim was a Hanif.
Mm-hmm.
They would say that there were a lot of Hanifs even at the time of Muhammad, even before his birth.
Yeah.
They would say all the Hanifs before Muhammad are like Muslims, but after Muhammad, you can only be a right kind of theist if you also believe in Muhammad.
But some of the Hanifs actually rejected Muhammad.
Yeah. They also went to war with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry,
what were you going to say?
No.
It's just that Mo wants to say something.
Yeah, go ahead. You haven't talked in a while. Go ahead.
I don't know much about the Hanifs, but what I do know is that Islam claimed basically every single prophet from Adam up until, Jesus, who's supposedly the last prophet before Muhammad.
Isa.
Isa. And so they basically blame the Jews for not converting to Christendom when Jesus, spread his message, and then they blame the Christians for not converting to Islam when Muhammad came along. and they basically see every single religion as it stands today as a perversion of its former self. So, like, the Judaism now is not the true Judaism of Abraham. You know, he's a righteous guy and stuff. And the Christianity of today is not the Christianity of Muhammad. But actually some Muslims go one step further and claim people like Buddha, who say, because I don't remember if it was a hadith or a Quran, but they say that there were many prophets before Muhammad.
Was it 124,000, was it?
I heard it was somewhere around 30,000, so I don't know. It's all made up anyway. So, they say like there are 30,000 prophets before Muhammad, and not all of them are mentioned in the Quran and stuff. So basically every single religion that preached anything somewhat acceptable, they say, oh yeah, he was one of us, but the people turned it into a cult of personality, like Buddhism, and now they worship Buddha and not God. That's just what I wanted to say. It's just that some Muslims, I'd say, like, I'd have a debate with a Muslim friend, and I'd say, okay, what makes you sure that your God is right and not like Buddha is the real God? How do you? And he would say, like, no, but I believe Buddha was like a prophet of God, and he was a good guy.
Yeah, has anyone here heard the song Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie? It might be before the time a lot of people overseas wouldn't know American folk music.
I thought everybody has.
Yeah, it's the song, you can get anything you want at Alice's Restaurant. And then he plays this long, he just keeps strumming the guitar as he sings, and then he tells the story as he's strumming the guitar about how he went down to the draft office during the Vietnam War and how he beat the draft. And he's in there, and they find out he has a littering offense on his record, right? So they say, okay, well, we're going to go down to that room and go talk to the psychiatrist. So he walks in, and he's trying to get kicked out, or not kicked out, but not inducted. So he walks in and says, "Shrink, I want to kill. And I mean kill. I want to see blood and gore and guts and veins in my teeth. I want to eat dead, burnt bodies. I mean kill, 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 kill." And then he starts jumping up and down, yelling, "Kill, kill, kill." And then he says, and then the shrink started jumping up and down, and we were both just jumping up and down, yelling, "Kill, kill." And then the sergeant came in, pinned a medal on him, sent him down the hall, and said, "You're our boy." And what made me think of that was before the show we were talking about Abraham and how all this, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all come allegedly from this one man. And I thought, God's up in heaven, sees this guy, and he's like, "Hey, would you just slit your kid's throat on a whim?" "I sure would." Pins a medal on his chest, says, "You're our boy. We're going to make a nation out of you." Captain, did you have anything more before we let you go?
I actually wanted to make a point about the Jewish-Muslim thing, but if we're running out, I'll let it go.
No, go ahead.
Okay, how much time do we have?
Oh, we have all the time in the world. Until the end of days.
Okay. The comparison between Islam and Judaism is like one of the most fascinating things, I encountered while I was studying about Islam. So my background is that I came to America like 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. Before that, I had not met a single Jew. My perception of Jews were these minority conspiring against Muslims, and they're all gonna get wiped out by Muslims in the future. That's all I knew about them. So when I came to America, for whatever coincidence, I came to live in a town that was like populated with a lot of Jews. So me and my family were like completely surprised to see how these people are. They were like very similar to Muslims. I'm talking about like religious Jews. Like even their appearance, they would have headwear. The women would wear what I would have called modest clothing. Mm-hmm. And they go to the synagogue every Saturday. They have services there, much like the Muslims who go to mosque on Fridays. And then I started researching about them, and there's even this video on YouTube where a Jew was praying and it's exactly like how Muslims pray. At first I thought it was a video of a Muslim praying, but then it shows like verses from the Talmud that explains how they should pray, and it's exactly similar to how the Muslims are praying, and they also have like ritual washing just like Muslims. They also have charity and fasting just like the Muslims, and they also have some kind of a pilgrimage to the Jerusalem and stuff. So this is like, and they also believe in one God. Mm-hmm. Not like a Trinity or anything like Christians, just like the Muslims. So this is like exactly like Islam. So after I realized that, this is like the 5 pillars of Islam. We have belief in one God. We have, the prayers. And they also have something like a charity and stuff.
Oh, I didn't know that. I don't know much about Talmudic Judaism. I only know what's...
Yeah, they have some kind of obligatory charity that they have to give. But I don't think a lot of people practicing it. But, it's part of their religion. There is also fasting and pilgrimage. So this is the 5 pillars of Islam. Just like, it's the same. So, my theory is that Muhammad, he saw how the Jews were, and they seem like a unified people with some kind of a central structure. And then he looked at the pagans, and they were just like these diverse, very pluralistic, just had no structure. I can actually kind of relate to that because in India, there are a lot of Hindus who like the idea of being religious and like the idea of being believing in gods, but they don't like Hinduism because it's just it doesn't seem as unified as Christianity or Islam. So I'm thinking Muhammad had that kind of feeling against the pagan religion, and he really liked how the Jews were, so he just started a religion just like the Jews.
Yeah, I think in many ways, I guess some people outside the religion at first equate Muhammad as the Jesus of Islam, but he's really more like the Constantine of Islam. He looked at the situation, and we will never know how much of the stuff he himself believed, or if he was kind of like a day server. But it does seem like he read the writing on the wall and said, there's a certain edge that strict monotheism can give you in terms of organization. That's just my 2 cents. So anyway, I'm going to let you go for now, Captain. Thanks a lot for your contribution, and we have
later.
All right, take care.
See ya.
We have Mohammed Mohsen. We got a lot of guests today. Damn.
You had good advertising.
Yeah.
Like I posted videos way ahead of time, and
oh, good. All right, we'll try to reach him again.
All these messengers that Allah sent beforehand, it's a shame he didn't send them places like China, where they were much more literate and wrote stuff down. Could have sent a few to the Greeks. They were polytheists. They were polytheists, and they could have written it all down. You could have had Archimedes making his Antikythera device, writing down a bit of God stuff at the same time.
Just read 414.
Oh, look at this. We found this really interesting paperwork. A way to use a corkscrew to bring water up out of the ground, and how to wash your nose before you pray to God.
Well, if you go and read 414, you'll read that they were everywhere in their own language.
Well, it was a bit of a failure, though, wasn't it? For a start, it was obviously a really poor approach, considering it failed on such a massive scale that the belief seems to have spread as word of mouth out of a single point, just as it would in the Middle East, just as it would have done if it were, say, a made-up religion or something. And then he sent all of these people, but it didn't spread from all different parts of the world, just this one part of the world. And all of the teachings were completely forgotten by absolutely everyone, apart from a few people down in this one area. Nobody wrote it down. They all thought, well, I'll remember. And it was all completely lost. No evidence of any of it whatsoever, except for just a few people in a single area. I mean, how big a failure could you get? Humans did a much better job. They invented the internet and put web pages up. Google. You know?
Yeah, but this is humans. I mean, this is the fault of the humans. As far as Muslims are concerned, this was a huge success because they had messengers in every part of the world. And they always told the same story in whatever language they wanted. It's just that the humans were so stupid to forget it again.
Well, I don't think...
Who made the humans stupid? Who made the humans so stupid that they would forget it and then decided, I'll send them a message that they should remember?
No, it's free will.
It's
Isn't
not
Yahweh
free will.
Well, I don't know
Isn't just Yahweh the most inefficient entity that ever existed? Because you could just beam all of his information directly to, if he's God and you can do anything, you can just beam it directly to our heads and know, oh yeah, there is a God. And it's just, and then you'd
just
have
a simple thing. When all these messengers came, send them all at the same time to every nation on the earth at the same time, give them all the exact same message but in their own language. They'll all write it down, and then any time someone looks at a verse and says, oh, well, in Arabic this could mean A or B, someone will say, well, let's have a look at Indian then. And they'll read it in Indian and say, oh, it say this in Indian. Let's have a look at the Latin. Let's have a look at the Welsh. Let's have a look at this. And then they'll look at it all and go, well, according to the 50 languages we've correlated, it means that there's a physical barrier between two waters, or I don't just whatever the word barrier.
Speaking of Islam, like prophets in China and other languages, I always found it kind of a cheap laugh that in China apparently Islam didn't get off on the right foot because the traditional word in China in Chinese for Islam is huijiao, which is circular teaching. And they use the character going around in a circle and then instruction. I don't know. I can't help but describe the thought that just obviously didn't have a high opinion, or it was just some arbitrary term. It doesn't seem phonetic, so he just said, it just goes around in circles, doesn't make sense. I'll call it huijiao. Okay, now someone has we had one caller left, but they didn't seem to be answering. We'll try him again if they send another message. Wait, he wants to try again? Okay. Hold on. Let's try that again.
Pretty sure he's in Pakistan, so...
Oh, yeah. Connection might be a little bad. Okay, well, that's too bad. Anyway,
at the beginning of the show, Klingschor, did you mention a charity collection for victims or something? And you said it was going to be linked.
Syria, yeah, Syrian Sweat, I think it's called.
Yeah.
I'll just have it.
Is it www.justgiving.com/sweat for Syria?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. I've just been asked if I would plug it. So I wanted
already
to
done. So yeah, we're just going to put it on our Facebook.
Just been plugged again, and it will be linked on Facebook. And I'm sure that everyone currently in this call is going to go and donate some money after we've hung up as well.
So I want to ask you guys a question.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
How do you feel about the whole mess right now in Palestine and Israel? And what would you think would be the best solution for this problem? Now, I want to just give you an idea of what I think. And if I may, I think it's kind of, the whole problem down there is religion, right? So these guys are hating on each other. No, they killed the people from our religion. Now we're gonna go hit them back, and it's just a back and forth. And maybe the Israeli government is doing it in a more sophisticated, more organized way, so that it's not so obvious, like suicide bombers and people yelling in the street, Allah Akbar. The thing that comes to mind is just like a one-state solution. So, like just make it one country under a single secular government. Wouldn't that be something? Because I always keep hearing about a two-state solution, but I don't really understand it. I mean, we're all just people, right?
Would that work? Do you think that this would really work? Because I do not think that the people will ever get along, because as you quite rightly said in the beginning, it is a religious problem. So in my eyes, both the Israelis and the Palestinians have the same right to that country, which is zero. Both go and say, well, we have religious scripture that says that we are entitled to this country. Well, so what? It is a religious scripture. The British were in control of the area, and they said to the Israelis, okay, we're going to give you a country so that you can now start forming your own country. And they said, well, we want this place because it's in the scripture. All right, I don't care for the scripture. I just care for what the British said to them and told them, and that is it. Somewhere you need to somehow set a status quo. Otherwise, Poland would never have a country. Otherwise, a lot of people would not have a country. I maintain Palestinians have a country, which is Jordan, and that's it. Just settle it and say the status quo is what we have now, and don't touch it again.
Well, I was actually thinking, like, if you're, much like in the United States, if you're born in a country, you're technically a citizen of that country. So I don't see why Muslims have to be deported from Palestine into Jordan or whatever other country. I mean, why Jordan? Why not Egypt or Lebanon or Syria? Or just spread them out?
That's not what I said. What I said is anybody is welcome to do whatever they want. It's only if they insist that they want their own country. If they cannot cohabitate with each other, that does not gel with me. If somebody wants their own country, if the Palestinians now go and say, no, the Jews have to leave and Israel does not belong there because our scripture says that this is our country, this doesn't fly. What I'm saying is anybody is welcome to stay there with however long they want, of course, but then they have to go and accept that the UK belongs to the Ukrainians and the Finland belongs to the Finnish. Just don't go and say, now we want to change everything and say, well, the Finnish have to leave. We are now the country. You have to go and bugger off. The same would be in Israel, where the Palestinians would say, okay, we want the country. All the Israelis have to bugger off. That doesn't work in my eyes.
I think that really what needs to happen is that the Israelis need to get out of the Palestinian territories, but the Palestinians need to not attack Israel once that happens. And that's it. Yeah. That once that happens, once the Israelis know that they're not going to be attacked and not going to have intifadas up their ass, and the Palestinians can actually move around without checkpoints, that's when everyone will be happy. So it's just sort of like that really slow process of both slowly edging towards that. I mean, ideally, right, it'd be great if they could just have one frickin' country and grow the hell up. But, yeah. I mean, like, you know, it'd be great if you could just have a Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Arab,
a secular country
of culture. Yeah, that'd be wonderful. I think that'd be fantastic. I think it'd be a great springboard for, you know, good science and so forth to enter the Middle East would be via such a conduit, right? You know, I mean, look at the amazing science and so forth that Israel produces. Like, imagine if that could really flow through to all the surrounding nations. So that would be my ideal. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, you've just got a lot of demagogues on both sides. You've got, you know, let's push all the Jews into the sea, and then you've got these idiot settlers building their little garrison towns in Palestinian lands. It's, I don't know.
I just want to plug my motto quickly. I wish religions would go where they belong, a museum, then we'd have decent.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, I griped last show about people who, you know, skeptics and atheists who were downplaying the significance of religion and problems in the world. But let's face it, there are a lot of stubborn and you know, militaristic-minded people. But even they often are sober enough, at least at the leadership level, to be able to compromise. And you could, you know, any two forces throughout history that have fought, you know, except in religion, that when it's all said and done, they sign a treaty and they say, okay, this fort's yours, this strip of land is ours. Okay, we'll stop fighting for a decade. And then, you know, but the religion just, I mean, you know, I was talking about gaming earlier. Anytime you're playing a game and you get two mobs to fight or two different groups of enemies to fight each other, you just sit back and let it happen. And it seems like the same God promised two groups the same land and then just hid behind a tree and started chuckling to himself as he watched the slaughter. But you know, as far religious conservatives on both sides stand in the way, I would say that my opinion on the matter has shifted a great deal since the death of Arafat, because Arafat was I don't think anywhere near a reasonable partner in peace. But now I'm growing increasingly impatient with the Israeli government, who, even though with the new Palestinian, at least Fatah's new leadership, they seem much more dedicated to training professional police and military and security forces instead of just militias running around. I mean, they're still not perfect, but they have taken a lot of really positive steps, and I don't think that the Israeli government has done nearly enough. I mean, they build more checkpoints even while that's going on in the West Bank, and meanwhile they pull out of Gaza, where they know it was Hamas stronghold even before the bloodshed between Fatah and Hamas. So it's like they're rewarding bad behavior and punishing good behavior, and I think their whole policy is just upside down. And they'll say things like, well, we can't dismantle checkpoints because if we dismantle checkpoints at this place, for example, on this hillside, we could be mortared. And I'm like, well, then don't dismantle them on that hillside. But you have to start somewhere. You have to start. You have to
exactly what I said. Exactly what I was saying earlier. They've got to. Both sides have to. It's that thing of they both have to slowly withdraw. They have to trust. They have to start the process, or else neither will ever move.
Yeah,
I'm actually tempted. I'm actually very tempted to blame this whole problem on the UK or the former British Empire, because they promised the Jews land right where they would receive the most opposition. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It baffles me why they chose this piece of land specifically. It's like we're gonna put you in the place where you're gonna get hated the most, in the middle of all of the people who actually hate you, have it written in their scripture that they actually have to hate you. So it just doesn't make sense.
Just to clarify, are you saying that the British promised the land to the Jews?
The Balfour Declaration.
So, hang on. So the British are gods. Just guys, know your place.
I just say that it ought to be noted that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict began as a secular conflict, not a religious one. However, the origins of the delineations, of a Jew may be religious initially, but Zionism was a secular movement. It wasn't really a religious movement.
How do you figure?
Because the main figures were secularists. The ultra-religious Jews opposed the bringing about Israel prematurely. Look, it was the Haganah. It was Ben Gurion. These people were not overly religious. These were secularists. And their opponents were Arab nationalists. Arab nationalism was the big ideology that was opposing Israel. It wasn't Islam. It was Gamal Nasser. It was the King of Jordan. It was Arab nationalism, in various different forms. And it was only, in the 70s that it really, when Arab nationalism failed, essentially, and fell apart, that, because Israel kicked their ass, that, religious, iconography became the cool thing to do. Not that there wasn't ever religious undertones. There was always religious undertones, but it was mostly like an ethnic nationalist conflict in like the 50s and 60s, and then it became religious afterwards. Like all the conflicts were initially like all the big ethnic conflicts that were going on at the time, like all the nationalist. It was the 50s, it was the 60s, it was the rise of nationalism. So nothing out of the ordinary there.
Yeah, someone in the chat was
saying...
saying...
as everywhere else, somebody will always exploit an us and them situation in order to get people on their side to attack someone else in order to make a small number of people rich or another small number of people powerful. In the case of the Israelis, they're becoming popular, they're getting elected. In the case of the Palestinians, they're becoming popular amongst their people for fighting against the Israelis. And all they're doing is they're putting down the enemy so that they can get the support of their own people. What people need to do is, rather than waiting for their governments to try to sort it out, they need to sort it out themselves. All they need to do is one day a week, they all have to meet up and just have a really nice picnic. Every week, everyone go and have a picnic. And then everyone will just think, oh, hang on, everyone's just as nice as my next door neighbour. the Jews aren't really trying to kill our children and use their blood to make religious bread, you know, and then everyone will just be much happier. They need to stop waiting for the governments to sort it out.
I agree.
I mean, it does have to come from the ground up, I think. These attitudes.
See, I'm at the opposite end. I think that, I mean, well, there's a quote attributed to Reza Aslan on the wiki about him, and the Wikipedia page about him, where he says that he holds Israel up as an example of a state that's modern and progressive. I forget his exact words. I'm paraphrasing. Modern and progressive, but still has a religious basis for its laws and society. And he held it up. He seems to be thinking that a state that's Jewish in the way Israel is Jewish, or Christian in the sense that the U.S. is erroneously thought of as a Christian nation because of the strong religious overtones compared to other developed industrialized nations. He seems to sort of envision a society along the same lines, but with Islam as its base. And I think that I couldn't disagree with him more in the case of Israel. I think Israel is a shining example of how a state that is industrialized and in many regards progressive and liberal still manages to have its politics utterly corrupted by a handful of religious conservatives. So
that's right.
It's just the
most Israelis are liberal and progressive. Majority of society. It's just, this religious elite just has a way out of proportion clout.
Yeah,
you know?
but I don't go for like the kumbaya solution. I sort of take for granted that they're going to hate each other for a long time, and given the blood that's been shed, how could they not? Realistically, they don't have to like each other to not kill each other. You know, I say, you know, if you get the religious nut jobs out of the room, I really do think that you come with a workable two-state solution. And
I think that really was what it comes down to. Both sides have got a really they've both developed like a cosmological narrative of their conflict, you know, you could say. And really, the best solution would be if they could just, you know, if I can live to learn it, you know, if I can learn to live with each other and be one little nice united society. They probably won't. So really, we just have to work on a reasonable two-state solution, going back to what it was before the Yom Kippur War. I think I can't remember.
But what about Ireland? What about the Catholics and the Protestants in Ireland? They have learned not to kill each other. They don't love each other. They don't embrace each other. But they are capable of cohabiting.
Yeah. I mean, if you let tempers cool, you know, a generation from now, or a couple generations from now, you know, Israeli and Palestinian children might read about these conflicts very dispassionately, the way we would read about the First World War or earlier conflicts than that, you know.
South Africa, blacks and whites.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is possible to move on, and the thing is, you know, what Klingschor was saying about how it has its roots in nationalism, and then slowly the narrative seems to have moved over to religion, and religion sort of moved in like a hermit crab and taken over. How many nationalist or ethnic conflicts have raged, and they all fizzle out in relatively short terms compared to religious conflicts. And this, again, going back to what I'm always bitching about, people saying, oh, well, even if you get rid of religion, there are other problems. Yes, but religion just... It takes the gold medal, you know. From my perspective, it takes the gold. There are
in the violence Olympics.
Exactly, in the irrationality Olympics, there are other solid competitors. You know, nationalism and ethnic divisions. Okay, they all give it the old college try, but I do think that in turn, there's just nothing more effective, no more effective glue or mortar to hold together an alliance based on lunacy and irrationality than religion. Okay, so I do think that it is our logical first step in terms of of arguing against it. But Kaiser Schlachten, welcome to the program. What do you have for us today? Also, I know that there are a couple people have messaged me with questions, and there's some messages in the chat. We will get to all that as soon as we take care of all of the live guests. And I believe Kaiser is the last one, unless. Well, anyway, go ahead.
Hi. I think this conflict, you know, besides the religious aspect, is not really hard to solve. I think we all know exactly, or not exactly, but kind of how the final solution is going to be like. We know that there's going to be some sort of division based on the 67 lines. We know that Jerusalem is going to be divided, and there's going to be some arrangements for the security. But there's both sides are holding on to these things that they know they're going to have to let go of. Like the Palestinians, for example, are refusing. There's like 4 million Palestinians in refugee camps around in the West Bank, in Gaza, and the surrounding Arab countries. And these guys are brought up generation after generation after generation, believing with their keys from before 48 that they're going to return back. One day they will return. And I mean, no one has had the guts to tell them you're not going back. And with the Israelis, I think they have not had a serious enough conversation about stopping like the control of the settlers.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys, they're not even, they don't make up even a tenth of the population, but everything to them is this strategic. We need to build here 10 miles deep. And it makes it almost impossible to divide fair. Like, we know how to divide it, but it's just the religious aspect is making it really hard.
Yeah, like I said, the religion, if it was an ethnic or nationalistic conflict, like it seems to have begun as being, then they could eventually just, they'd still, both sides would have their propaganda, but in some secret smoke-filled room, they just say, okay, here's the dotted line, here's your dotted line, here's our dotted line, let's come to a compromise. But it's religion is causing both parties to, you got your family out of the burning house, and then you run back in for something utterly trivial. It's just like I said, the settlements, no matter how much of the problem overall you consider them to be, they're not worth it. They're not worth it. What's the gain? It doesn't.
It's annoying to me because just the Israeli government is extremely efficient. Just tear down all the settled homes and drag them all back into Israel. Like, that's it. Like, everyone agrees that they're illegal. And that's it. And then great. And then you haven't got any settlers in there, so then you can say, okay, that's your land. Now we can have, like, it would just go a long way, I think, to really mending some of the damage. And I mean, and is there a special designation for Palestinian refugees? Is that it's not just if you were kicked out, it's your children and your children's children, your children's children, they're all classified as great. So guess what? I have a stake to land in Italy because my grandfather fled from Nazis in Italy. So I must have land in Italy, right? Like ridiculous. It's the most stupid thing ever. And I mean, it's just really all these Arab countries around just hopeless in actually dealing with the Palestinian refugees. They took no care of them. Yeah. They just let them fester in these big nasty camps. Like it's shocking. And then there's this big revolution in Jordan of the Palestinians against the Jordanians. Black September. Like, and then they all run off to Lebanon, and that's where Hamas, fucking Hezbollah comes from.
But there's
Sorry. No. That's rant concluded.
All right. But I have to say one thing for the Israelis. It's that they've at least proven that they're willing to let go of settlements. They've done it twice now. I mean, when they signed their peace treaty with the Egyptians, they they pulled out people by force. And a couple of years ago, in 2005, they did the same thing in Gaza.
Yeah.
And as bad, as much as they're being, as much as some of their policies are being influenced by the religious parties, they still have people who are willing to say, okay, we have to be rational, and we're willing to do something that's historic. But right at the day the day they were left, for example, the last day where they pulled out the settlers from Gaza, people started throwing rockets at them.
Yeah.
Because they,
See, and that's what I was talking about earlier, where the Israelis need to know they won't be attacked when they withdraw, and that's really what I was thinking of. But I mean, I know that some, I'm pretty sure many Arab leaders have also offered to make huge compromises, and the Israelis have refused. So both sides have acted stupidly.
But I'm not going to say that both sides are equal. I mean, I believe that the Israelis, because of maybe their secular, their secularness, are able to compromise.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, the Islamic world is being filled with Salafis all around who are uncompromising idiots who want to hark back to the 13th century and believe this is like the Crusades, and that, we fought the Crusades for 200 years. We haven't even fought 100 years yet in this conflict, We've still got another 140 years to go.
Sorry, what did you say? Did you say that Israel is secular?
Well,
it is.
No, it's not. Okay, I'm not going to
say... For that neighborhood, maybe.
Yes.
No, I'm pretty sure
it's anything but. Come on.
No, it's like the USA, secular, with lots of religious idiots.
Yeah. I think it's like England, where the Anglican Church is apparently the head of, is the official religion of the country. Yeah, and what I would say, it's not a religious state, but it's a, Jewish state, in that it's favorable towards the Jewish ethnicity. The same way that, Turkey is favorable towards Turks. And
okay, let's get something straight. Secular means that there is a barrier, pardon the pun, between the church and the government. Do you see, and in Britain, I see that there is a separation between church and state. I do not see the separation between church and state in Israel.
Well, in Israel, they don't have to...
There's a difference between politicians kowtowing to religious people and the laws being religious laws.
Exactly.
I think Israel...
America's a secularist country, and yet, you won't get into office if you're an atheist.
Yeah.
Look at the UK. We're not a secular country. We're officially a Christian country, but if a politician comes on TV and says that God's talking to him, he will never get elected. It just won't happen. It's the exact opposite in both countries. I say, make every country in the world a Christian state like the UK, if that's what's going to happen everywhere else.
But there's something pretty scary in Israel right now, and it's that the ultra-Orthodox folks are having kids like rabbits. And, and they're supposed to be, they're going to have a quarter of the population in, I think, 2050. And these guys don't actually have to go and enlist in the army. They don't have to pay. They're not conscripted into the army.
Bullshit.
Yeah. And
wait, who? What?
They don't have to. The ultra-Orthodox, the Haredim, the dudes with the giant Russian-looking hats and stuff. Those dudes, they don't have to be conscripted into the army like other people are. Them and the Arabs, because apparently they have to study Torah studies.
Yeah, I think they don't even have to pursue any kind of employment.
They get a lot of state subsidies.
I would be furious if
that was in my country.
Yeah, if I was part of any community that just supported a completely indolent class of people who, I mean, that's as parasitic as it gets. It reminds me of medieval Tibet and how these peasants would just live these brutal lives trying to support monks who were very well fed and meditated and they were warrior monks. And what's funny is the portrayal of warrior monks today is always noble in the Shaolin Temple. These warrior monks trained so they could beat the shit out of the peasants when the peasants talked back. So exactly. You got these Jewish monks who are just sort of leeching off of the state. I would be furious if there was a policy.
The problem is that the ruling government now is filled with, the National Religious Party, the National Torah Union, but it's actually a pretty big subject there.
Yeah.
So they do have a history of progressive thought. So,
well, I think
the problem is that
the societies,
they're not considered human. The Jews aren't. I don't know how this came about. Like one thing I don't understand is, like, during the Crusades, somehow the Christians in the Arab world survived through that whole ordeal. But now, somehow, like, it's impossible. If there are Jews anywhere, they're like persona non grata, and not persona non grata. I think in any Arab country, they're not allowed in. They're not considered like fully human. I don't know how this came about.
But the same thing is going to happen in Egypt now, because in Egypt we're going to be looking at a situation where the Copts are going to have a pretty hard time.
Yes, they will.
I think it happens with any minority that's despised, or any ideological conflict. Look at the way that the Russians were depicted by the Americans, and the Americans depicted by the Russians in the Cold War. You've got to objectify your perceived ideological enemy, which justifies you taking action against them. So I think this happens during the Crusades. The Arabs and Europeans, or Christians and Muslims, demonized each other tremendously.
But
or whatever.
But the Christian community survived up till the modern day, But somehow, like, there's no more Jews left anywhere.
Oh, but that's modern. That's just better. We've got better technology. So there was, Israel was able to send all these aircrafts to whisk away Jews out of places like Yemen really quickly and efficiently, rather than them sticking around being oppressed. Some forced conversions, and then things going back to a more stable way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it probably has more to do with that, because following the creation of Israel, there was a huge exodus of Jews out of the Middle East into Israel, and modern technology enabled that.
Right. And those people. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Did you have more? Or
yeah, just what I was asking was, what do you guys think the United States should do to alleviate the tension, or what should be the U.S. role in this conflict?
Stop funding Israel. No.
Well, they need the U.S. needs to lean on them really hard and say, look, if you want any form of future support, you need to make positive steps, regardless of what's happening on the other side.
Yeah, that's it. You got to be the bigger man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so many people fighting. It is someone. I mean, if you can't be, equally yoked. Although, to be fair, like I said, I think that Abu Mazen in Fatah. I know a lot of people. There's some offensive quotes that are attributed to him. I know that people are really alarmed that he's mending fences with Hamas, but. He's done a lot. He seems to be serious in terms of he's willing to give his half of the traditional Arab-Israeli deal. That is, land for peace is the traditional thing. He's got his product that usually is exchanged. He seems willing to enforce a ceasefire and crack down on loose cannons. So I think that the ball is really in Israel's court. I don't think they're entirely to blame, but I do think that the initiative is theirs in the U.S. The problem largely is that there's more Zionists, there are more Christian Zionists in the U.S. than there are probably Jewish Zionists in Israel. And that's the thing, is there are a lot of Christians who feel that God will be angry with the U.S. unless they do whatever the Israeli government or nation wants, and that's an extremely counterproductive activity, because you're just giving them carte blanche to do whatever they feel like, because they literally, evangelical Christians have a superstitious fear of the state of Israel, like an elephant.
I've seen documentaries where you've got Christians coming over from the USA, and they're working free of charge for Jews who are making farms that are trying to expand into Palestinian territory. And their reasoning is, we're helping Israel to become an established nation because once it is, Jesus will come back.
And then all the Jews will either convert or go to hell. The way Jews fit into Christian eschatology never made any sense to me. It's like, you know, when you're a Christian and you're doing a Bible study, and they're like, okay, these are the Jews, they're the chosen people. Well, for a Gentile, you're like, well, who are we? We're just whatever, miscellaneous. We get to tag along, and yet we go to heaven and the chosen people go to hell. It never made any sense.
So what would the consequence be if the US would pull out of any kind of intervention in Israel?
I think lots of people would go and start war on them, wouldn't they? Because without the support, they'll be able to fight back for a while, but they're going to need replenishment of weapons and stuff.
I mean, there were actually times, if you look, there were times where U.S.-Israeli relations became strained, and there were no weapon deals between the U.S. It's hard to believe now, and they just bought them from the Russians and Chinese, so they'll get, they have the more modern gear. They could probably hold their own, but hopefully it wouldn't come to that.
I'd like to bring up a point on fasting and Ramadan because people have been talking about it in the chat, and I watched a documentary on UK TV recently which was about sports drinks and things. And it occurred to me that many Muslims probably get up. I know that many get up before the fasting starts and they pig out a bit so that they don't go hungry during the day. And it occurred to me they probably drink lots of water as well to keep them ticking over for the rest of the day. But what was interesting when I was watching this thing about sports drinks is they were the adverts are telling you to keep yourself hydrated all the time, and people who were running the London Marathon were like running along and they were drinking in order to keep dehydration off. Once you've thirsted, it's too late, you're already dehydrated. So they were drinking in order to not get thirsty. And what this documentary said is that obviously, if you overdrink water, you get water intoxication and it can kill you. And the statistics say something like no one has ever died of dehydration running the London Marathon, yet 12 people have died from overhydration. So if you're going to fast at Ramadan, don't get up early in the morning and drink loads of water. It's best that you go thirsty. And then when you finish fasting, drink what your body wants you to drink.
I remember doing that.
My medical advice for the day.
I remember doing that as a Muslim. I'd get up because usually, like, my dad would wake up the whole family and he'd make us the food, and then just after eating, there'd be bread and stuff, and then I'd drink maybe like a liter or a liter and a half of water, and then I just feel like I'm gonna explode. And that was just what everyone does, and then you'd wait all day and you'd get thirsty naturally, and then you pig out at the actual breaking of the fast, the breakfast.
How old were you then?
My last Ramadan was a year ago, back when I was still an agnostic kind of wishy-washy Muslim. I defined myself as a liberal Muslim, so I was like, yeah, I don't really care much, but I'm just going to do this, you know?
So you never had the feeling that you were doing something good and spiritual?
Not really. I just felt it was like self-inflicted torture. Of course, you'd feel really good once you've actually got the food in you. You'd feel like, oh my, God loves me. I just, oh God. But then that feeling would go away because you'd be also full and stuffed and not able to move. So you go to sleep feeling bloated, and then after a hard day, you also feel bloated because you eat a lot and then you drink a lot to wash it down, and then you just gain 20 pounds by the end of the month. I actually remember my last Ramadan, or that's what most Muslim youths do, is that they sleep at dawn, and then wake up right before the breakfast. So in essence, they only fasted for like an hour or two, which is an interesting loophole if you think about it. So they wake up the whole night, and then they just sleep the whole day away.
Do Jews have this as well?
No, I wouldn't know.
Oh, well,
I think Ramadan is actually inspired by Christianity and things.
No, I think Ramadan I think was inspired by a pagan thing, because they had like 3 holy months. You had the 2 months of no warfare, and then 1 month of
fasting
of religious rites and fasting. Yeah.
Look, there's a book where a chapter of it is devoted to looking at the origins of Ramadan, and it looks at various things. And the most likely thing is it was a Ghassanid Christian thing where they had adopted like an Arab Christianity. So the Arabs had taken a Christian fasting thing, but they had applied it to the month of Ramadan, and that's sort of the best explanation for the origins that I remember.
Yeah, because I know definitely the month came from the early Jahiliyyah days. Okay, well, I'm going to let... what's that?
Nothing. I was agreeing with what I said. Should we wrap things up now?
Yeah, hold on. We have DPR wants to talk. Well,
that's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, Mo, thank you very much, and Kaiser, take care. Come back anytime. Salam. We have DPR Jones, who is going to talk to us about his upcoming charity event, his annual MSF thing that we are all proud to support. DPR, welcome to the show.
Sermon.
Hi, how are we all?
Good.
Interesting show. Can I just pick up on the last point you were talking about? Because I didn't know the history of where fasting came from, but obviously over the last couple of weeks I've been watching the Olympics, which I have to say I think it's been absolutely fascinating. I don't know whether you're sports fans or not, but what I found interesting was that because Ramadan came over the same period as the Olympics, the Muslims who were participating were given dispensation from fasting. And I just wondered, I don't know who they were given dispensation by, but is there anything in the Quran to say that, if the Olympics is taking place, you can have dispensation from fasting?
No, yes. And ironically, the Olympics did exist at the time, so there's no excuse.
They do have exemptions. For example, it says that if you're pregnant and blah, blah, blah. So it's the usual thing that if you, for example, have to pray towards Mecca, if you are on the ISS, you don't need to do that. If you are in some circumstances that you cannot do the Hajj, don't do it. If you can't do the fasting, don't do it. So there are cases where you are exempted from this.
Yeah, but they're out of
this is an exception. This is a dispensation. Apparently, they have to do it later, after the Olympics is over.
That's also common with prayers. Meant to be 5 prayers a day.
That's only supposed to be if you're unable to, though, isn't it? Like, if you're ill, and if you fast, you'll be dead. Then no, don't fast, eat, and if it takes 3 days for you to get better, then you have to fast for 3 days at the end of Ramadan to make up for it. It doesn't say like if you can't or you need to jump really high.
But as with always, it's up to interpretation or down to interpretation.
No, you know what my favourite one is? My favourite one, I think I saw it on the Dawkins forum, and it was Jews weren't allowed to travel on the Sabbath or something. But then as travelling became more prevalent and people were taking longer boat journeys, they'd be on boat journeys that lasted longer than a week. And then said, well, we can't stop the ship in the ocean because it will move anyway. So someone came up with a special idea that it must be exempt. If you're travelling over water, then that's an exception. And from there, over time, it got to the point where rabbis were sitting on trains with their feet in buckets of water so that they could travel on a train on the Sabbath.
Oh, goodness. Can I make a video of this?
I'm just going to go and have a wee now.
Oh, my goodness.
Reminds me of scenes from Pirates of the Caribbean. We sidetracked. You invited me on very kindly so I can give a shout out for the charity event that is being organised again this year, which will be taking place in 4 weeks' time in aid of Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders. it'll take its usual format, 24-hour show streamed onto the internet, probably blog TV, but maybe also Ustream. And over the last 3 years, we've raised over $100,000 for the charity. And from that, of that, 25% has come from items that have been donated by people to be sold on eBay. So if I could please invite anyone that's watching either live or when it's subsequently posted on YouTube, if you have any items that you could donate to the charity, please send an email to msfebay@ymail.com. Provided we are allowed to sell it under the terms of eBay, we'll do so. We do all the hard work for you. We sort everything out. We post it onto YouTube. All you have to do is then subsequently, once it is sold, put it in the post. Also, donation pages are already open. There are 3 this year. There's a First Giving page, a Just Giving page, and a chip-in site. So the best way to access any of those, if you're minded to make a donation, is to go to the Magic Sandwich Show website, www.magicsandwichshow.com, and there is a page on that website dedicated to the event. So please support it. Please donate items for auction. And as I say, it will start at 4 p.m. British Summer Time on September the 8th and run for 24 hours. I'm not minded at the moment to give you too many clues as to who will be appearing on the show. There'll be some of your usual favourites. There'll be a lot of new people that you haven't seen before. And we're trying to spice it up and make it more interesting, more lively, more fun than it has been in previous years. So there we are. Look out for that in 4 weeks' time.
On the subject of people donating things to be auctioned to raise cash, I've got something that I'm going to donate, and it's something that I find to be extremely precious, that I would really, really love to keep for myself, but I'm going to part with it for money. And what it is, if you remember the Quran scientist miracle claims in the Quran, this is the truth that I've got a channel debunking, where I've interviewed the scientists that were misrepresented. There is a Quran called by someone called the Quran Project, and in this book it's got these people from the documentary This Is the Truth are quoted in there, like Alfred Kroner and so on, stating that there are scientific miracles in the Quran. After interviewing these people, I've interviewed 4 of them: William Hay, Alfred Kroner, Pete Palmer, and Professor Tom Armstrong. I sent this book to each of them, and every one of them kindly wrote a statement inside the book saying that their views were misrepresented. I'll read out the statements to you. William Hay wrote, "The statement attributed to me in this volume does not correctly represent my views." Pete Palmer says, "As one of the scientists in the project on miracles in the Quran, I was not then, nor am I now, convinced that any of the Quranic scientific statements are of divine origin." Armstrong says, well, Armstrong's a bit difficult to read, actually. I did have a printout. Hang on a second. Mr. Armstrong says, "My appearance in the video This Is the Truth, sponsored by Sheikh Zindani, has been edited after the fact to misrepresent my interviews as endorsing the scientific validity of interpretations of the Quran." And finally, Alfred Kroner writes, "The statement made on various internet pages do not reflect the opinion that I voiced at the time of a TV interview in Jeddah, took me out of context, and the entire matter is fabricated." I'm not sure if you can see the text, but what we've got is statements by these scientists in their own handwriting with their own signatures, basically refuting the lies of the scientific claims of the Quran made in their names. I would like to auction this for MSF event, and considering how much I would dearly, dearly love to keep it, but I can't because they only signed it because I was going to auction it, I really hope that someone's going to pay a lot of money because this is a really unique item.
And can I just say thank you enormously to Rationalizer, because I know that he has spent many, many months getting that organised, and a lot of his money sending that book out to people to get their signatures and the like. So I'm really very deeply in gratitude to you, Rationalizer. If anyone else wants to do anything, don't think that you have got to go to the same trouble as Rationalizer is. But thank you very much for your efforts, Rationalizer.
That blows the shit out of anything I could ever think of to donate, like a German submarine. One quick thing before we, two things before I go. I have something I'll say for the very end because it's silly. But there is a question. Someone's been patiently waiting. This is probably I'm going to direct it to Klingschor. There is a hadith commonly referred to as the pen and paper hadith that it's controversial in its implications. Apparently, on his deathbed, Muhammad asked for a pen and paper where he was going to write down something, including the matter of how the caliphate should be handled. And Umar, according to the hadith, said, no, the Quran is enough. Are you familiar with the one I'm talking about?
I'm not, I'm afraid.
Really? Oh, well, then I guess that's...
is it Sahih?
I forget which collection is it from. We may have to address it next show or something like that if because I don't want to... I've heard this before. But I don't remember which collection it's from. Well, you know, I'll make a point of addressing it first thing next show.
Can I just suggest another?
They say it is from Bukhari.
Have it as a
Could I just
address
another suggestion that's been made to me by Cosmic Contrarian, who suggested that if people promised to come up with £100,000, would I try and get Thunderfoot and PC Myers in a cage fight? Yes, definitely.
No.
For that sort of money, I would do anything.
Awesome!
That would be the sissiest slap fight ever.
Be fucking wicked, mate.
Oh my god! Can't anyone just play nice? Why does everyone have?
It's like the archetypal Israel-Palestine conflict.
Yeah.
Jeez,
people airing out their dirty laundry left and right. It's ridiculous.
Hey,
can we change the subject quickly, please?
All right. If anyone,
I'm terribly sorry for bringing it up. My bad.
Yeah, blame it all on DPR. All right, so if anyone wants to access the Syrian fundraiser, that'll be on our Facebook, as will the link to the Magic Sandwich Show's website on our Facebook, which you can access if you look at the Blog TV banner. You'll see a little Facebook item. Click on that. You'll go to our Facebook page, and you'll find the links there.
I love the ideas you have, these clickable links in the banner. Where did you get that idea from?
I just thought of it myself. Really?
Good, eh?
Well done. I might have to copy that.
I'm just a smart cookie, really. Like, yeah, you should really get that for your show as well. Like, just get up to date, mate. Seriously, get with the modern.
Okay, so one last little thing. Someone, if there's a doctor in the house, can correct me because I could be dead wrong about this. But there was one event that was very defining in Muslim Jewish relationships, and that was when the Jews kind of sort of poisoned Muhammad, and he was really kind of upset about it. Kling, do you want to? It was a lamb that they poisoned at a feast.
Yep. Oh yeah, well essentially following Khaybar and Muhammad sort of conquering and distributing, killing all the men, distributing women as slaves and so forth. After that, there was this Jewish woman who, as you can imagine, wasn't too rapt about the situation, and so she basically made a poisoned lamb and gave it to Muhammad. But unfortunately for Muhammad, one of his followers died and ate it just before Muhammad had properly eaten his one. So Muhammad had a little bit, and Muhammad became ill from that, but didn't die. But they reckoned that this poison sort of contributed to his death.
Yeah, there's a quote. There's a hadith wherein it's years later, and basically ever since he eats from it, he complains of chest pains consistent with a blockage of his ventricles and such. Right. So apparently this isn't like whatever she put in it was kind of a slow acting poison. Like it wasn't a neurotoxin that causes muscular paralysis. This is just sort of something like some sort of chemical that the body doesn't break down. Right. So it gets into your bloodstream and it clogs up your heart, and then you have heart failure, And there's a lot of poisons that work this way. The poisons even that occur sometimes in nature. Sometimes, like I said, it's a muscular paralysis. Other times it clogs up your heart, and you have heart failure. Here's the thing. He complains to Aisha years later that he says that poison that I ate all those years ago, it feels like it's tearing my aorta or something like that. You know, this is before the invention of aspirin, so you couldn't take an aspirin a day for minor heart conditions or for heart therapy. You know what could have saved his life? Wine. A glass of wine a day might have saved him, because it would have thinned the blood enough that the platelets wouldn't sort of congeal too much, where the toxin was clogging up his arteries. So a glass of wine a day would have, but he banned it. So
poetic justice.
Yeah. So much for angelic home remedies.
And now what do I say? Thank God nobody told him.
Perhaps. Yeah. I mean, it's funny that the Jews killed the Son of God, and then also the last prophet.
Hey,
these darn sneaky Jews, really.
If there's a
plotting and scheming.
If there's a Messiah or a prophet giving you trouble, who you gonna call?
Yeah. Ghostbusters. Oh, I don't know how you can make it.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Salam alaikum.
And add us on, click on the link, go to our Facebook, like us, subscribe to us on YouTube. And to summarize Jews and Muslims in a sentence, there were periods of coexistence, there were periods of extreme conflict and violence. Yeah, it was a broad spectrum.
Okay, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thank you very much. And the snippets of statements that I wrote out were only tasters. They weren't the entire statements made by the people. So if you want to know the entirety of what they wrote, you'll have to make sure you're willing to pay the most money.